My question is, you spoke about the hollowing out of the Labour Party. If that's true, as I'm sure it is, who's representing the working classes now?
Well, this is a problem that we've got. There is a serious issue, and this is part of the, and I hate to use the word betrayal because it's so overloaded, but this is the problem of this very particular historic legacy, a duty on the political party that is the Labour Party to represent the poor, to be their voice. They're not doing that anymore. And don't worry, I'm not saying that the Tories, this is not the job of the Tories. The job of the Tories is to represent the nation, and they're not doing that either. So, I mean, both our major parties are in a terrible mess, but working class people who tend to blend left economic policies, but not as socialist as Corbyn, but certainly left economic policies, with national populist cultural policies, that they don't have a political, even UKIP isn't really there, or the Brexit Party is not there representative. They're not represented in this country, and that's very bad. You can't have a situation where a significant percentage of the electorate has no one to vote for. That's very dangerous.
Yes, because I'm from a working class neighbourhood, and the people I talk to, they just don't feel inclined to vote because they don't feel there's anybody to represent.
Yes, that's exactly right. And if you talk to Labour people and Tories who campaigned in the local council elections, they will tell you exactly the same thing.
In fact, the MP in my area is a Tory, and the working class people grumble non-stop about the fact he doesn't get off his bottom and do anything for them. But if you're middle class or upper class, he seems to be very, very active there.
No, this is a traditional and legitimate criticism of the Conservative Party.
I agree. I mean,
that's a fair criticism, and it's shameful, and it embarrasses me. And I'm a member of the Conservative Party, but I know it goes on.
Well, this is what I would think that UKIP would be trying to move into at this point. I'm just a YouTube commentator who's standing for an MEP position as a protest, to say, look, we should be out by now. So I'm not exactly the best person to speak about it, but I honestly think that UKIP is the only party that really has the kind of right ideological framework to move into that space. Because, I mean, like you say, we're not an anti-capitalist party or anything like that. But I've spoken to many UKIP members over the course of being in the United Kingdom Independence Party, and there's a strong streak of a desire for redistributive justice in this regard. Like, I'm completely in favour of the NHS, I'm in favour of our social safety nets and for pensions and things like this. And I've not met a single person in UKIP who disagrees, who thinks that the opposite should be correct. And so, while the party generally is sort of like a pro-capitalist, sort of entrepreneurial sort of attitude towards it, they're absolutely not against the idea of having these kind of social services. I mean, I imagine there's probably quite a strong streak of renationalise the railways in UKIP, because, I mean, I use the railways all the time, and they're awful. And I remember when they were nationalised, and they were better. They were cheaper, they were less inefficient. And now, and I spoke to some of the people in the Swindon station, and they let me know that, well, the reason there are so many delays is because the company gets charged, I think it's £200 a minute or something like that, and it's just cheaper to pay the fine than it is to fix the problems, because the problems will cost tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of pounds, whereas the fines are a lower percentage, so they just pay the fines and be damned with it. And I'm sorry, I think that's unacceptable. And that's my ticket fares going up and things like this. So honestly, I would put UKIP as the only party that can move into that space. I don't see how Labour can do it at the moment, because they're becoming a very bourgeois, middle-class sort of party. The Conservatives, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but you accept that they've dropped the ball on this completely. And I don't really see what other options we have.
When the railways were, I will just point out, when the railways were privatised, against all advice from economists, the rolling stock and the rail track were separated from each other. And all economists at the time said that was an extremely stupid idea, but nonetheless, that's what happened.
Well, like I said, I'm working class, my family's working class. In fact, some members of my family have moved from working class to middle class, so it's up and down like a yo-yo with families.
My family too,
yeah. But I just haven't been interested in politics for a very long time because there's nobody to actually represent the interests of the working class, and it just seems to me the more I look at UKIP, the more that they're picking up that drop ball.
I really do think it's terrible that there is a significant, like you say, significant slice of the population who just have no representation. I mean, I personally feel like I'm coming out of that. Because, I mean, where am I supposed to go? You know, I'm interested in free speech, I'm interested in individual rights, I'm interested, not necessarily, I don't like neoliberalism as an economic model. You know, I'd like to go to a more sort of like nationalistic capitalist model, you know. And I don't want socialism. I don't hate the rich, I don't want to tear them down, I don't want to, like, you know, private, like, take their businesses away from them or anything like that. But I don't want them to be the ones dominating how the economy is run, because it's bad for the working person. So there must be a middle ground here, and I really think that UKIP is the only party that can move into that at this point.
So in discussion with friends, Sargon, I have, most of my friends are genuinely kind of left-leaning with that kind of age bracket, that sort of thing. And most of them are naturally Brexit voters. Since the referendum came and since everything that's been going on then, they haven't moved much on the topic. And well, one of them is, I think, second-generation immigrants, and another has international business going on, and sometimes it's really difficult to engage with them on the topic of Brexit because they have personal concerns that are going to incur very real costs, even with Brexit going on, even with it being worth it. And I was wondering if you had any advice on how to engage with that, it's going to hurt them, but it needs to happen because it's an evil empire.
Yeah, I agree with Jeremy Corbyn's assessment of the European Union completely. Honestly, I think really we're going to have to make appeals to duty at this point. And I think that, you know, duty is a sort of traditional British value, and I think it's something that still resonates with people. I mean, if you look at the way the Remainers are approaching any of this subject now, they have now abandoned all pretense of caring what the electorate thought. They've abandoned all pretense of caring what is good for the country as a whole, and now they are repeating the, I don't like it. It's me, it's my feelings. I can't separate my feelings on the subject from the political reality of the subject and what would actually be good for the nation as a whole. So, I mean, the European Union was very quick to say, right, okay, we're closing ranks, and now it's us versus Britain. And we, you know, our Remainers are kind of acting like a fifth column, saying, well, we're going to do everything we can to sabotage any kind of Brexiteer spirit in this country in order that we can actually undermine the result of the largest referendum, the largest democratic vote that's ever happened in this country. So I'm afraid we're going to have to get a little bit high-minded about it. I can't think of any other way because, you know, I mean, there are going to be lots of people whose personal interests are affected by this. I mean, there's estimates of somewhere between like 6 and 12% of the economy will be lost. It's like, okay, well, yeah, that's bad, you know, but I mean, like, you know, this is really quite an existential question for the United Kingdom itself. Because, I mean, there's no doubt that there's going to be further centralisation and further consolidation in the European Union after Brexit is finished. You know, so if we stay in, we're going to have things imposed on us, and if we leave, everyone else in there is going to have further consolidation imposed on them. And it's really, do we want to exist as a country? Because the European Union wants to become a European superstate. They've got all of the mechanisms in place. They've got everything that they need, and they only need now an army, central banking system, and a tax raising abilities. And they're very close, and you can see they've got plans for these things as well. So it really is, do we think that the countries of Europe are good ideas? And I really do think that Britain is a good idea. And so, yeah, we might have to make a few sacrifices, but at the end of the day, you can apply that kind of, you know, oh, well, it's going to hurt me personally. Well, okay, well, I mean, you know, do we say that about when the Nazis invade Poland? I mean, what do we say? When do we draw the line, you know? And if we've made the vote, I think that democracy really does matter in this regard. And, yeah, well, sorry? Absolutely we do. But yeah, so honestly, I think it's going to have to be a case of high-minded, duty-bound to principle here. If Helen's, if you've got any ideas on that, I'd love to hear.
I don't... but I used to, when I was last in Australia, I worked for an Australian politician. And because of the political system in Australia is different from here. The upper house is very different from the Lords. It's called the Senate, and it's immensely powerful. And my politician boss was what was known as a crossbencher. So, because the Senate is elected proportionally, so there were minor parties in the upper house that weren't in the lower house. And because the Senate is of equal power to the House of Representatives, the equivalent of the Commons, there were times when my boss, a single senator, because deliberately it's structured so that there's odd numbers so that one side can always win or lose, had the casting vote on a major policy. And this probably happened 4 or 5 times while I was working for him, and he would sit in his office and sweat bullets. And before he made his decisions, and I'd periodically get quite grumpy and say, "Can all my staff, fuck off to the trough," which is this part in Australian Parliament House where you can go and get a glass of wine and some food and that kind of thing. It's like a little restaurant, and it's called the Trough. And he would be sitting in his office sweating bullets. And he used to just use this one phrase, and it's something that always comes to me, and it's relevant in the context of Brexit as well. Public policy is hard. Brexit is the most difficult exercise in public policy that has been done in these islands for some time, and everyone is doing it very badly, and I'm sorry. And sometimes it's just best to be honest about something like that. It's just a terrible, terrible mess. And
it is.
I can be funny and write funny columns for the Specky or the Australian or whoever and say it's this, that and the other, and I have done. But underlying the humour is the recognition that this was an unexpected vote. It's been managed very badly. Referendums don't work well in the context of the constitutional architecture of the United Kingdom. And it's all just very hard and messy, and we're just going to have to sort of muddle through somehow.
Yes. Yeah, no, I think muddling through is definitely the best way to put it. But honestly, I really do think that, ask them to think like a statesman. Ask them to think, okay, you didn't get your way, but with the reality that we now have, what is the best thing for the country? And the best thing for the country is for the Remainers to frankly get over it. I was completely prepared as a Brexiteer. I thought it was going to be 48 leave, 52 remain. That's what I thought it was going to be. And I was I had a video ready. I had public statements prepared saying, look, this is not the result I wanted, but I'm going to have to accept it because every time you cast a vote, there's an implicit assumption that you'll abide by the result. And if that's not there, then why the hell would we vote in the first place? You've just completely unraveled democracy in this country. So it really is incumbent on them to say, okay, well, I have to accept this. That really is.
I feel like pride as a Britishman is fading among younger generations, especially people my age in that 18 to 25. And a lot of people I know, when I say, are you proud to be British? Are you proud to be English? They say, no, I'd rather be from somewhere else. How would you combat that and instill a pride in British history, not just nationally, but among people that may think that, well, I don't really feel like I fit here?
I'm of the opinion that there's been a deliberate campaign to attack the very notion of what it is to be British, and you see this on TV all the time when they say, well, what are British values really? What are they really? There's a very simple answer. The crux, I think, of the identity and value system that is represented is the idea of fairness. It's the idea that we should have a fair society. We should be fair to one another. And as soon as you say that, I think a lot of people go, well, yeah, that is what British values are, And it's from that, I think, once you've found like this kind of incontrovertible piece of truth, that we think that fairness is a good thing, you can look around the world and see that many other cultures simply don't share this value as a baseline value. It's actually really difficult to find other cultures that actually do think that fairness is a good thing. And so once we can, stop this continual pushback against the very notion of why being British is a good thing, and we can say, no, it's good because we're for fairness. We think that's a decent thing to do. And then we can start building and pushing forward against the sort of the innovating forces that are trying to take that away from us. But I think it's been entirely deliberate because, frankly, I think that there are large portions of this country, I think particularly on the left, the sort of John McDonnell types, who have, John McDonnell has called Winston Churchill the villain of World War II. Right? Now, if that's not the biggest attack on British identity you can imagine, I can't think of anything worse. We see this all the time from The Independent, the left-leaning papers, where it's like, well, half of the country still thinks the British Empire is a good thing. Why is this? because it's our history. And it wasn't all good and it wasn't all bad, but it's what made us what we are, and it brought us to this point. Winston Churchill, for all his flaws, I mean, imagine what his Twitter account would have looked like had he lived now. It would have been brutal, way worse than anything I say on Twitter. So but we've got to accept the good with the bad. And I honestly think we've come back around sort of George Orwell's position here, and I actually have a copy of Notes on Nationalism on me, and one of the things that he noticed was that the intelligentsia of his day in the 30s were very, very much pro-communist and very what he called Anglophobic. They seem to get a kick out of watching Britain take a hit, take a loss. They seem to like it, and they seem to think that really, I think what it is, they think there's a promise in the values of this country that is never really fulfilled because we're just people, we're just humans, we all make mistakes. And I think that they kind of like self-flagellating in that regard, say, well, look, we're never going to be good enough. It's like, well, we're never going to be perfect, but I think that what we have here is something decent. I mean, we've got, a really prosperous, a really free country with really fair-minded people. And if that's not good enough, what the hell do they think is? What are the alternatives? And I think that that's the kind of the foundation from which we can actually start to build or rebuild, the sort of the positive aspects of British identity, and then say, look, we are actually proud to be what we are. Because, I mean, you can listen to Margaret Thatcher's speeches in the 80s, where she will literally just openly say, we are proud to be British, we are proud of who we are, we're proud of our institutions, we're proud of our cultural heritage. And you can't imagine the Conservatives saying that now, can you? You can't imagine anyone saying that now, but it's true. We should be proud of these things. These are good things. So that's the and then, I mean, look at the sort of parliamentary democracy. It's Britain's great gift to the world, the common law. The fact that the law works for the regular person is not just the tool of the state. These are unbelievably, these are the roots of civil liberties that Britain gave to the world, and for some reason we're supposed to be ashamed of being British. I reject it completely. So I hope that helps. I mean, Helen, if you've got any ideas as a non-Brit, that would be great.
One of the things this is something that is worth nicking from Australia, because Australians do it very well. People love Australia not because they think it's better than everywhere else. In fact, that's the opposite of the Australian attitude. There's this phenomenon in Australia known as the cultural cringe, where people will often rank other countries better than Australia. But Australians are perceived to be, accurately, as very patriotic. Australians love their country not because they think it's better than anybody else, but because that country is theirs. And the root, to me, of a healthy nationalism is that you're not trying to engage in some sort of ridiculous national one-upmanship. That is stupid.
Yes.
It really is. I mean, that's how to turn nationalism into a Python sketch, and I'm sure there's lots of them. The root of a healthy nationalism is to love your country because it's yours, to love your country for the same reason as you love your spouse.
Yeah.
Because that person is yours, with all its faults, with all its flaws and all its foibles and all of those things, because that's your job, because it's your country. If it's got something wrong with it, it's your job to try and fix it. So yes, try to always focus on a healthy nationalism is inward looking.
Yes.
It's not actually outward looking. It's not the business of any other country.
Yeah.
I mean, and that doesn't preclude you from making jokes about Germans having a weird sense of humour or no sense of humour or whatever it is, or French people caring more about cheese than anything else. I mean, you can make all of them, and you can make the same jokes about Britain. There is no such thing as real food in Britain and that kind of thing, or the way you go to Scotland, and if you've never been to Scotland before, I lived in Edinburgh for 4 years. I used to be a solicitor up there, and the way they would get the American tourists and tell them about the wild haggis that had shorter legs on one side and longer legs on the other because of running around the Munros, which were all the mountains in Scotland. You're allowed to do that. That's fine. That's life. But yes, you love your country because it's yours, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, I really haven't looked into all the ins and outs, so I may not be politically adept, but it's really like a soft question, really, to ask. You, as a representative of UKIP, which you are, describe in 5 words what UKIP means to you and what it represents.
God, 5 words. Right?
Yeah.
I would rather be given half an hour to waffle on.
Oh, and I know that, but I haven't got time. I got to go to the supermarket to get a few things, on the bike.
Now you're stuck.
What about yourself?
Okay, Han. I guess I would say pride in a sovereign country. Is that 5 words?
Okay, that sounds really good.
That's what it is to me. Like Helen was saying, this isn't about a competition with other countries.
Of
but
course,
it really is just about the fact that we are good people. You know, we know we are. We're the ones who take responsibility for our actions.
Yes.
And I really think that part of taking responsibility for the country that we are is being a sovereign country. The decisions about this country should be made in this country.
Exactly. Exactly. I totally agree.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that I want to, I don't want to build a wall around the channel or anything and never speak to anyone again or any of that nonsense.
Yeah, I think really the British have not been coming forward in what they are good at and what they represent. And I think a lot of, say, the older generation have been very dismissive of the teenagers and what they believe. My son is 17 and he is totally interested in politics, wants to be involved, wants to move forward with everything. Also, the other thing that what particularly interests me in this country is payment of TV license. So if you were to go in to politics now, could you totally dismiss that? That we do not have to pay this unfair tax.
I would do everything in my power to get the TV license abolished. I think that the BBC is trading on a reputation it no longer deserves.
Exactly.
It was set up with it earned a wonderful reputation back when Attenborough was running it and all of the sort of previous generation. But now it has become, just like all of the other media outlets, it's become, like the Brexit coverage, something 90% pro-Remain. That's unreal how unrepresentative of the country at large it is. It's probably very representative of the Westminster bubble, but we're not in the Westminster bubble. We're the country at the large, and the BBC is something we pay for, and it doesn't represent us. It doesn't actually try to inform us. They propagandize us. So let them compete like the rest. That's what I say.
And I mean, a lot of young people do not watch TV nowadays.
Absolutely.
This is what the future generation is. Even in schools, a lot of the teachers do not show YouTube videos for personal advancement or education. They're totally against that. So I think the whole country should just move forward.
I agree.
Really.
I agree. I think the BBC is just, honestly, I think, again, dereliction of duty. I hate to keep using this term, but they had a duty to be neutral and impartial, regardless of how the individual journalists felt about the subject. And they completely overlook this and say, well, my feelings matter more now. And it's like, well, I'm sorry, they don't. They actually don't. We've got larger responsibilities at this point, and how you felt about it, well, that's kind of irrelevant.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the time and good luck with everything.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I've spoken to quite a few people who voted for Brexit, who, since seeing what the establishment is doing to Brexit, have just gone, given up on politics. I don't care. And I was just sort of wondering, how do we convince these people to come out and vote? Because we need these people to come out and vote more than ever. And, well, I kind of sympathise with them at times because politics are really depressing business. So sometimes I don't know quite what to say to them. So I was just wondering what your thoughts are, really.
Well, I mean, my thoughts on it is I don't like politics. It's ugly and grubby, and it's got the knives are always out, and it's really not something that the regular person would want to be involved in. If you got to see behind the curtain the sort of things they do and the sort of things they discuss, you would be disgusted by it, and rightfully so. At this point, I think that the best thing that anyone can do is send them a message, and that's to find whatever party it is that you feel is not within that kind of closed circle and vote for them. Let them know that there is principled opposition to the way they're running this country, and that we are not going to be bound by their rules, and we are going to just start building something outside of their shadow. The sort of thing they kind of that's honestly that's the reason they hate the United Kingdom Independence Party. You'll notice that the Brexit Party is currently being very heavily promoted by the media. The Westminster bubble, they're all in favour of it. Isn't that weird? Isn't that weird how Nigel Farage went from being this virulent racist, this evil xenophobe and all this other, and then suddenly he's the golden boy of Westminster. I think that's very strange. I would definitely recommend choosing a party that is deliberately outside of this kind of construct in order to make your voice heard. That's the only thing I can think of. If you've got any ideas there.
I mean, I've recently joined UKIP, but I've watched a lot of your videos, and it's convinced me that UKIP is the party for me. But how do I convince more people of that? People who just don't want to listen, who want to bury their head in the sand and get on with their lives and not think about politics.
You may not be thinking about politics, but politics is thinking about you. That's my response to that. Australia has compulsory voting. It's the only country in the OECD with fully funded pensions, because the old people can't vote themselves a better deal by shitting on the young people, because that's not possible because of compulsory voting. Not voting is an act of deliberately cutting out your own tongue. I cannot think of anything worse. Vote.
Yeah.
It really is a case that, you know, you might not be interested in them, but they are interested in you, and they will never leave you alone. That's the thing, because I mean, what you're speaking to is the desire to have a separation between the public and private life. You know, these people just want to be private citizens, go about their business, and not have to think about these things. Jeremy Corbyn is not going to stop thinking about the things that you guys are doing. You know, Theresa May is not going to stop this.
Snooper May.
Exactly. They will always be breathing down your necks. And so, I mean, you know, I'm the sort of guy, I want to just be left alone. You know, that's the reason I'm doing any of this, is because they wouldn't leave me alone. You know, and now I've had to go to the European Union and campaign against Article 13, which passed in a landslide, because they all want it. They all want to have their fingers in your business. And the only way to resist this is, unfortunately for everyone here, to get political and start voting against them. And I think that UKIP is the party that is against them. I really do.
I completely agree. Thank you very much.
Hi, Carl. You'll have to bear with me because I'm not all that clued up on politics.
Don't worry about it.
I wanted to ask you about the Lisbon Treaty. Is that all right?
You can, but honestly, I think Helen's probably the expert
Oh, well,
on that.
you know, all I wanted to know really was the get out to leave is extended to October the 31st. If we don't come out, will the Lisbon Treaty take effect in the new year? Because it's supposed to take effect next year, isn't it?
I don't know.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm afraid I don't have the answer to that.
Nobody knows. The problem is, I mean, the European Union's a very particular legal order. It's not a sort of conventional international agreement, although something like the rules around Article 50 are a treaty, which is why you had initially these, when people were saying, oh no, we can just extend Article 50 to whenever we like, and you just sort of, all the lawyers are sitting there going, no you can't, because there's another side to this bargain, basic laws of contract, you have to agree. The expression used in EU law to describe the type of entity that the European Union is it's sui generis. It's not of itself, of its own. It's not like the laws that exist in France or the United Kingdom or wherever, but it's not like the United Nations either, which is relatively powerless. But it's also not like the World Trade Organization or GATT, which is relatively powerful but doesn't make any country's domestic law. So what we've got now is, by leaving, everything is sort of broken. And some of the more thoughtful Remainers have made this point. I mean, a lot of them are quite febrile, but the point about that it's like breaking off your hand because you've half wedded yourself to this other legal entity and it's become part of you. That's fairly accurate. You know, it's Brexit. One of the reasons why Brexit is proving so difficult, it's not just the incompetence of the civil service or of Westminster. I can remember they're called public servants in Australia, which is a country with a much stronger, more recent tradition, particularly for trade deals, going, it's going to take them a decade to unwind all of that because it's all so entangled and such a mess. So, yes, literally, the part of the problem with Brexit is it is an entry into the unknown and things aren't clear. Yeah.
But, I mean, good job on offending all the bureaucrats, because they really didn't want this to happen. And I mean,
they have to do it all.
I know, but that's what they're paid for, so that's not my problem. They can get on with it. You know, I don't care if they're upset by it. You know, I wanted sovereignty, and that's what we're going to have to get.
Well, the reason I asked is because it's got 27 passages or something in it, and Reverend Simon Sideways, on his blog last week was reading out all the bad things that happen. You know, if we go into the what's the name, and I just wanted. It's sort of like a scaremongering thing, isn't it? Really, like the Tories and that. They talk about, you know, when you leave, everything's going to come to a stop, you know.
Yeah,
and I've got 2 grandchildren. I just wanted to know where we stood with that sort of thing.
One thing that I speak to a lot of people who work within these companies, like I can't remember the name of the delivery company, and like, you know, places like Poundland and stuff like this. And that all of the messages that have been coming down from the high ups are everything. You know, whenever anyone asks, just say everything is going to carry on as usual. You won't notice any disruption to your services. So I don't believe that things are just going to grind to a halt, because I don't believe they believe things are going to grind to a halt either. And I think that their major concern, I mean, like Poundland put out a statement saying, could you just give us a decision? You know, are we staying or leaving? We just want to know so we can plan and make contingencies for these events. We just need to know. And that seems to be what's costing business all the money at the moment. Is the
business loves certainty.
Yeah.
They don't care which side the state or the electorate comes down on. They just want a decision.
Yeah. And it's.
I mean, I used to be a corporate lawyer, and I can tell you, the thing that came from my clients was always, we need a decision, we need it now, then we can go. Yeah. But yes, ultimately, I mean, obviously a lot of businesses are very opposed to Jeremy Corbyn becoming Prime Minister for very obvious reasons. But a normal sort of Labour government, a normal sort of Conservative government, they don't care really who wins as long as they know. And so the problem with Brexit at the moment is the uncertainty.
Yeah.
People just don't know because of this chronic failure of Parliament to do the thing that it was asked to do, to get back to Matthew Goodwin's analysis.
Oh, okay, thank you. Carl,
Thank you.
My brother's a fan of yours. Can you just say hello, Les?
Hi, Les.
Thank you.
Hey, my name is Chris. I'm a media student from Derby. I came down today. And I'd like to ask you a question about a Daily Mail article that's just been written about you. That's obviously a smear.
Which one's this? Sorry.
The smear. They took 4 quotes out of context to smear you as being a paedophile. This is obviously...
Yes, this is quite disgusting, isn't it?
It is disgusting.
I'll talk about this as well.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. So for anyone who's not aware... I've had conversations with people who believe quite radical things, and I've always been in opposition to these people. But I'm interested in hearing what their arguments are and trying to persuade them out of it. Because they, whether you like it or not, they have followers. They have a media presence. And the best thing to do, I think, is to air bad ideas and present them in their most charitable way, and then explain why these are bad ideas. And in the process of doing this, I've had 4 different conversations that, and it wasn't actually the Daily Mail that compiled this. It was someone else. I don't even know who it was. I don't want to name any names in case I'm wrong. But they've taken 4 individual sentences out of the context in which I was using them, long-form conversations, and mashed them together to create like a Frankenstein statement, as if this was something I said. Now, this wasn't something I said. And in fact, several of these statements were actually me specifically saying, oh yes, they're going to take this out of context. And when in the conversation, we're laughing about the fact it's going to be taken out of context. And lo and behold, here we are. So yes, all of this it is just a disgusting smear, but this is the level to which they're dragging things down. And so, I'm wondering, what is it that they're actually so afraid of? If they're going to go to this length, I mean, obviously I'll be able to take legal action about all of this in the near future, because this is just totally unacceptable. But this is the way they're taking politics. This is the direction they're going in when it comes to someone who's not part of the traditional political establishment. I wasn't educated at Eton. I don't go to their socials or their bars. I'm not part of the establishment. And so this is where they're going to go with it. How much worse can it possibly get? And why are they doing it like that? But sorry, Helen, you wanted to...
Well, one of the bits that was taken out of context in this way was a conversation that Carl was having about differential sexual morality in classical antiquity. I'm only going to talk about this one because my first degree was in classics. Kingdom of the Wicked has got a ancient Roman setting. The video that Carl and I have done that's all about Kingdom of the Wicked, nearly all of it is, on his Sargon of Akkad channel. You could do the same thing as was done to Carl, making it sound like I was endorsing aspects of Roman sexual morality that are very different from modern sexual morality. It would not be hard to do this. No one's done it. because, well, you know, I write for the Specky and I went to Oxford and so on and so forth. So I'm not the sort of person that's going to happen to. But what was done is that it created a situation where Carl's conversation with someone else who I think was also a classicist about classical antiquity and the fact that these were very different civilizations with different moralities, with different values. The past is a foreign country, they do things differently there, was then made to look like Carl was endorsing kiddie fiddling.
Which I obviously wasn't.
Is that a scientific term for it?
The thing is, and just to follow up on that, the next part of this is that it's not just Carl that this is being done to.
Yeah.
2 other candidates have been chased horribly in exactly the same way and made to look completely appalling. And to give you an idea, it's the classic, again, people outside of Labor and Conservative.
Yeah.
One of the candidates who's been traduced horribly, as badly as you, is a woman called Nora Mulready, who is actually running for the Cucks, Change UK. And they've gone after her, accusing her. Now, she's a Remainer. This shows you how Brexit divides people, but she's very pro-free speech. And she's very concerned about issues in the North and Midlands with high levels of Muslim immigration and problems of integration. She has written about this in a very sensible and thoughtful and humane way, and Momentum have gone to war on her and gone to war on Chukaramuna, trying to get him to kick her out of the Cucks. Fortunately, he hasn't, but they did do a dirt file on 2 other cuck candidates, and because of they tend to be more from the centre-left and they're worried about the way they appear on social media. Those other 2, Nora was the first one to stand her ground and go, no, I'm not apologising, I am continuing to stand for the European Parliament. If you support Remain, vote for me. But the other 2, they just fell on their swords because that is the expectation in the centre-left. Now, once again, you mightn't like Change UK. You might think Chukaramana's a paperclip salesman. I certainly, he's got all the charisma of a middle manager in a firm that manufactures paperclips. You might think all of that, but that they are not Labor, they are not Conservative, and so their candidates have been attacked in the same way. And the other one, of course, is Claire Fox in the Brexit Party. Once again, party outside of Conservative and Labor. Oh, let's find the thing that she said 30 years ago when she said something nice about the IRA. It's the same phenomenon. And Toby Young calls it offence archaeology. It simply has to stop. One sentence on Twitter does not represent Carl Benjamin. One article about Muslim immigration in the north of England does not represent Nora Mulready. One comment about the IRA 30 years ago by Claire Fox does not represent Claire Fox or the Brexit Party. This is nonsense. It has to stop. If you're going to elect someone to Parliament of whatever sort, you have to see them in the round before you work out what you think of them. And I'm sorry, what the Daily Mail did was absolutely disgraceful. And for those of you, I mean, I suspect many people here are either Tories or ex-Tories. For years, people in Labor have complained about the way the Daily Mail reports things. And,
suddenly it's a bastion of truth-telling. All of a sudden,
it's suddenly the best thing ever. But there was a reason why they made those complaints. Now, this time, those kind of reports are being done in the service of the Conservative Party. It's not helping the Conservative Party. Look at the local council elections. It's doing them no good at all.
No.
But they're doing it to protect the Tories. And the thing is, for once, instead of attacking Corbyn and Labor and various lefty people, they're attacking people like you that they perceive to be on their right.
And what I find really interesting is it really is. I mean, like, you can see, like, there are so many smears. It's just constant smears these days. And what they're doing is they're effectively going to make it so that people aren't allowed to have long-form intellectual conversations anymore. Because if we can't, in all of these conversations, I prefaced what I was saying with very clearly, this is my belief on the situation. I think, like, the age of consent should be 16. I actually think it should be raised at this point because of the increasing infantilization of young people as they grow older and fail to grow older. But this thing, it was very clear what my position was, and that I was doing as Aristotle suggested. The mark of an educated mind is to entertain an idea without accepting it. I was engaging with these ideas to see whether there was any truth to them or why they were wrong and all this sort of thing. But by doing this kind of dirty journalism, but these kind of like smear pieces. What they're saying is you can no longer have these kind of conversations. You can no longer have detailed conversations about serious issues that really do need to be addressed, because there are people on the other side of the argument who actually believe these things, and you have to engage them. I mean, like, I'm looking forward to them painting me as a Nazi, because I've argued against many Nazis in my time, and I'm sure that you can sit there and do exactly what Helen was saying, clip up various things. Oh, suddenly, look at that, he endorses Adolf Hitler. And it's like, well, where does this end? You know, and it just becomes, I mean, hopefully it just becomes ridiculous in and of itself when, you know, and another part of it is like, do people not think, well, hey, here's a guy you've never heard of before. Don't you hate this guy? Look at all these things that we've said. Oh, you should hate this person. I mean, if that were me, I'd be like, who is this? You know, why are you bringing up just some rando that I'm supposed to hate? You know, it's very Orwellian and sort of like, you know, the 2 minutes of hate sort of thing that they think they can get away with. But unfortunately, I don't think that sort of politics is going to work. I really don't think that that's something that can be. I don't think that's something that's tenable that can go forward. So thank you for the question.
Well, here's the actual question I was going to ask.
Oh, sorry,
spoke too soon.
Yeah, sorry.
So. Because they made this article, it's disgusting. It is slander. It is. And I presume you're probably looking into legal action against them. I am, yeah. Yeah, and you should. You rightfully should. It's absolutely disgusting. As a citizen of the UK, I find it absolutely disgusting what they've done. I think the media are far past, you know, almost hard to help. But this is what I have a problem with. That's being put out there. It's like that 2 seconds where you see the headline, you read it, and then you're labeled from then on. And people don't look at, you know, your videos. They won't go and actually look into it. They'll see it. They'll be like, there's a person in UKIP who's a paedophile. Don't vote for him. And it's absolutely disgusting.
It's just lies.
It's absolute lies. But it seems like because of they're doing this, I mean, you could pursue legal action, but would it really even make much of a dent to them? And it's the case where they have almost, because of that, a monopoly on information, a monopoly on the current zeitgeist, and they can persuade anyone, and with really little actual consequences.
Well, this is actually why I think it's so important to protect the freedom of social media, because it is social media that allows us to go past the gatekeepers and the establishment media, and this is why their numbers are going down. You know, every year their numbers
This
are
video,
shrinking.
when it goes up on Sargon's channel, will be watched more than that Daily Mail article will be read, I assure you. People don't realise how ephemeral the print media is. They really don't. It really does finish up lining your kitty litter box after 3 days. I mean, yes, it'll still be up on their website, but this is much more likely to persist, at least for this election campaign.
And not only that, it's like, I think that it's a certain particular kind of person who actually reads any of this as well. You know, I think that the regular person who, like the other chap was saying, they just want to get on with their lives, they don't read this kind of nonsense. So I think it's becoming a shrinking bubble of people who this applies to. And the more we can do to break out of that, the better, in my opinion.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Getting tired giving out leaflets today.
I'm sorry.
Because everyone who disagrees with you won't tell me why. I've had so many people now look at me with revulsion that I can even ask a question, why you disagree with UKIP, and they say, no, I don't have any time to tell you.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk to these people. I won't look at them, and I won't listen to them. How do you live like this?
Well, lots of people come and talk to me, so thankfully that's not something I have to worry about. But I wonder what kind of prison they put themselves in when they say I'm literally not going to hear an alternative opinion. But honestly, I think was it Mark Twain who said it's easier to fool someone than to persuade them they've been fooled, and I think that that's the kind of position we're in. I mean, I think that when they've established a sort of an emotional position, it becomes very difficult to just change your mind on that, because suddenly you kind of have to go back of all the people you've, like yourself, you know, if people are walking past you insulting you based on nothing, you know, they don't know anything about you, just based on a leaflet.
Purple man bad.
Exactly, yeah. Then it's kind of like a moral dominoes, where they realise, oh God, I've done something wrong there. Oh God, now I have to apologise. Oh God, there are a lot of people I might have to apologise for too. And so it's a lot easier to just maintain the fiction that you are the bad thing that they've had it put in their heads, presumably by the media. it's a lot easier to do that, I think, and that's the only rationale I can think of. But as the people who disagree don't seem to want to come and talk to us, I have no other way of figuring it out.
There were two people I've spoken to today who did have things they disagreed with you about and wanted to challenge you, but wouldn't do it in public.
Right.
One of them because his friends would unfriend him.
Right.
The other because his managers in the local government would consider his behaviour unacceptable.
Right. Well, that's honestly why I don't think we're actually living in a free country. You should be free to discuss your personal political opinions and carry on with your life. I don't think that there should be this kind of social ostracization for merely having a dissenting opinion. And I think that is the path to conformity and oppression.
One of the great achievements historically of the trade union movement was basically to ensure that people's minds weren't owned by their employers. That was a great historic achievement of the trade union movement, so that the mine manager couldn't sack the coal miner who happened to be secretary of the local branch of the Labour Party. We're losing that. Your mind does not belong to your employer. And I find it quite shocking that I am having to make this very basic point of Labour history, considering I'm a Tory. But it doesn't just apply to mine workers, it applies to everyone. And at some point, maybe legislatively, a line is going to have to be drawn around people's private life and their ability to engage in public politics that is separate from that of their employer. Because I think the idea that people's employers can own their minds, regardless of their employees, regardless of and own their politics, regardless of these people, if these people were pro-UKIP or anti-UKIP or anti-Tory, I don't care what their politics are. But oh no, if I get up at a political forum and talk about something, I'll be in trouble at work. That is nonsense. That is absolute nonsense. That should not be happening in this country. And any employer who does that to an employee, I'm going to start sounding like a rabid socialist here, wants to use the Australianism, an absolute kick up the freckle. And I think you know what freckle means.
Yes, but I mean, we're the country where we got the idea of a separation between a public and a private life. You know, you should be able to engage in these things. I can't think of any other sort of cultures around the world where this is something that was valued. You know, and it's always been an unspoken thing, hasn't it? It's always just been like, well, yeah, I mean, of course he's allowed to have his opinions, but, you know, I mean, obviously don't talk politics in the workplace, sure, you know, but when you're not in the workplace, when you're out doing something else, when you're, you know, in the street just talking politics with some candidate or something like that, you know, you should be able to have these conversations without feeling your job or your friend circle is at threat.
And it's worse than not being able to talk politics. I remember watching the Clegg-Farage debates years ago, and they were really cracking debates.
Yeah.
One side answered all the questions rationally, and the others repeatedly returned to mechanical talking points like a robot.
Yeah.
So I asked my colleagues in the office the next day what they thought of the debates, and it was like I'd asked them which kind of dog shit they liked the smell of. Right. They thought, how could you dirty your ears by listening to that awful Farage man?
Yeah.
So they didn't understand any of the debates. They didn't want to hear anything that could contaminate them.
Well, I mean, I do view this as kind of like a form of moral authoritarianism, where you're shamed into just thinking differently, for thinking differently. You're shamed, and it's honestly, it's kind of like a cult behavior. It's fear of the unknown, fear of the outside, and fear of just engaging with anything else. But what it speaks to is a phenomenal fragility in their own emotional well-being. They can't. It means they don't know why they believe what they believe. They just know that everyone else believes it, and so they have to believe it as well. And if someone comes in and says, well, hang on, I actually have principled opposition to the things you're saying, and I can explain this in clear terms, then they're going to have to reevaluate everything that they believe. And then they're going to have to sit and go down to their own first principles and say, well, why do I think this? You know, and they might find themselves on a particularly uncomfortable journey, and they're going to get shamed by their friends. They're going to get attacked at their job, and so it's just a lot easier for them to say, "No, I reject the heretic. This is the one true political orthodoxy. This person is evil. I am good, and never never there shall be a conversation about this." And so, I guess all we can do is just keep pushing forward, keep having these sort of conversations, keep going out into the public, and hopefully, at least getting some people walking past to hopefully listen to what we're saying for 5 minutes. That's all I can say.
Thank you.
First of all, thank you very much for taking the trouble to join us today. I'd better explain who I am. I am the person who is supposed to be looking up to Carl because he is second on the list for the European Parliament.
Yeah, my apologies.
And I am third on the list, and there's a guy called Lawrence Webb who is leading the list. But the most important thing is that we have a second vote coming up. I don't know how many people realise it, but it's going to take place on the 23rd of this month, and it will be to elect parliamentarians to the European Parliament. And your choice is going to be your choice as to whether you vote for a party which wants to leave. I personally stand here as a candidate. I've stood here as the MP candidate in 2010 for UKIP, where everybody had the chance to vote for me, and a small percentage did, about 11%, if my memory serves me correctly. And the rest, and the parliamentarian put in place was the Liberal Democrat. Since then, you've had a Conservative MP. And now we just look at it and look at the unholy mess which our two main parties have got us into with this referendum that took place into 2016. We voted by a small majority, admittedly, out. Now, that has not happened. This is an opportunity for everybody to have their say yet again. And I would urge everybody to make use of that opportunity. I've been with UKIP for the past 12 years. I started in grassroots, and I was down as an ordinary member in 2007. I've been chairman of the local constituency branch, I've been chairman of the county branch, I've been chairman of the regional branch, and also in a fit of madness I accepted chairmanship of the National Party for 6 months. That was about all that I could take, I'm afraid. It was beginning to blow my mind, and I passed it on to somebody who was far better equipped to deal with it. But I have been part of this party, and I've seen it grow, and I've seen it slide, and I'm seeing it grow yet again. The party stands for some very important ideals, and they are ideals that you should all be considering. And the better the vote, the higher the vote, then the more of a statement you can make as members of the general public. We've just had local elections. UKIP hasn't done very well, but only 30% on average of the voters turned up to make their vote for local ward councillors and for local district councillors, etc. Now, are we going to have the same problem when it comes to the European elections, or are we going to see a huge increase in that percentage? I stand unequivocally to represent the people. And I know from a long conversation that I've had with Carl that is exactly his point of view. I wholeheartedly support him on that. And that is the party's point of view. We see a bubble, the Westminster bubble we call it, and these are people who are going there, collecting their allowances, collecting their salaries, and just getting themselves involved with a centrist form of politics, where we in the southwest are left out of sync. Now, that's the position. You will see a whole host of other parties who have decided to take advantage of these European elections. The choice is yours. Please do research, and please consider UKIP as a party which stands unequivocally to leave the European Union. That doesn't mean that I hate going to Europe. I love going to Europe. I love going to France. It means that I am upset by the political strength, the political might of the European Parliament, which I do not consider to be democratic. Thank you.
Hey again, Carl.
Hi, man. Nice to see you again.
You too, man. So at the end of a video that actually got posted to your Facebook, actually, I said about the smear merchants, these people don't deserve a readership, they don't deserve our trust, and in fact they deserve to be in prison. And I was challenged on this, and I've actually doubled down, and I've got a video written that I want to release, but I want to kind of hear your thoughts on the idea of criminalizing defamation, which because you know, if you go to the Press Gazette, you can get a feel for what these people feel were noteworthy stories of major media outlets getting done for defamation. Looking through 2018, just things they thought to be notable. There were 3 different major outlets that were listed twice for different cases of defamation, Daily Mail among them. Daily Mail was listed 3 times in 2017.
Oh, what a surprise.
So, like, the way I see it is, as the chap before said, you can very well sue the Daily Mail, but they're too rich. It doesn't make a dent. You look at these articles, and they have been sued for exorbitant sums of money, and it doesn't make a dent because it's more profitable to lie. The reason why newspapers sell for less than it costs to print them is because they get it from the advertisers. Yeah. Same with on the websites. They're just paying for the clicks. Lies get clicks. They get more money from that than they pay out by lying and getting caught every now and then.
Yeah.
So, you can see that with the very upper class, simply suing for defamation doesn't make a dent in them. And with the very lower class, when you're talking defamation, say a false accusation of rape made socially, if someone is bankrupt, if someone is on benefits, etc., they have nothing to take.
Yeah.
There is no way of actually getting that retribution, and there's no way of actually getting justice. Whereas if you could pinpoint the person responsible for defamation, say in a journalist company, you force them to keep backlogs of what they ask you to print, whether it's the boss saying, I want a smear piece written, if it's the journalist deliberately making a smear piece, or if it's the editor turneling writings into a smear piece. Force them to pinpoint who's responsible. The person who's responsible could face prison time, but the suing also gets the money for the recompense. So I was wondering what you might think about that to actually hold these people accountable and bring honest media back to Britain.
Well, Helen's actually a legal expert, so I'd like her to answer that if that's all right, because I have a funny feeling that I'd say something that had severe knock-on effects or something like that. So, Helen, please.
We used to have criminal defamation. It used to exist. It was progressively gotten rid of across all the jurisdictions that developed it, both in Roman or civilian jurisdictions and in common law jurisdictions. And the reason for that was because it was abused by the powerful to put their critics in jail. One of the reasons why reaching for the state to hit something bad is so tempting is because you see something bad. You've identified a real problem. And there is a real problem here. I mean, one of the reasons why the media is so unpopular everywhere is because the assumption is that everyone is telling lies, or you're making it up or being so politically partisan that there is nothing of any use in a newspaper or even social media with the recent bans. It's being applied to anything that looks like a publisher, even if it's not treated in the law as a publisher. The problem is that you give these great powers to the state, and the state is run by exactly the same sort of people. It's run by people like you and me, with the same people. It's the same people with the same flaws. And yes, we have an establishment, and that establishment will abuse that state power in exactly the same way as it already does, but it will have the immense power of the state. And the state has a monopoly on the lawful use of violence, which is what makes it so terrifying. The state could throw you in jail. That's why defamation was walked back in every jurisdiction to being a civil rather than a criminal claim, something that could only be settled in terms of money. So you get damages, which is, and the legal formulation is as close as money can make it to making it better, basically. That's why it was changed. There are, however, genuine issues with, for example, a few years ago, the school teacher in Bristol who was accused of murder. Now, he won in defamation and got a big payout. But the only reason he was able to win, I mean, a school teacher, they don't earn huge amounts of money. The only reason he was able to win was because he was legally aided. Now, one of the things that's been gutted in this country is legal aid, and particularly civil legal aid. So you can't get legal aid in family matters, and you can't get legal aid in matters like defamation. But family matters is very serious, and banking also, because they harm the little guy, the little person. However, criminal legal aid has also been cut. And so criminal lawyers who are supposed to typically defend and protect the poor and the vulnerable are not able to do so because defamation, because legal aid has been cut to pieces. There is a very, very good book you can buy just called The Secret Barrister. There's Waterstones over there. It's very popular. You will be able to buy it. And he goes through all of these issues: the cutting of legal aid, the problem when what happens when you say you have to believe all women or believe all people who complain of racism or so on and so forth, and how it destroys the presumption of innocence in the legal system. These are huge issues, and people, idiots like Chris Grayling are responsible for the mess we're in. And yes, he's another Tory, but how is Chris Grayling still in the government? He's a walking disaster area.
How is it there are so many Tories still in the government?
Chris Grayling has the Midas touch in reverse. Everything he touches turns to shit. So yes, there are problems, but giving the authorities an establishment the ability to put people in jail for this is not the solution. The solution is to fund legal aid properly, all of it, including the criminal legal aid, so that matters are brought to trial, so that procedures are dealt with expeditiously, and so that everyone gets their day in court. That's the way to fix this problem.
And I mean, I like exactly as Helen's saying, the problem with giving the state increased amounts of power is that doesn't go away. Maybe we feel confident about it with a Conservative government, but we've got Jeremy Corbyn coming next. And imagine what he's going to consider defamation. Imagine how he would use this against his critics. And it will be his critics and not his smearers that are doing this. So, yeah, I mean, I'm just really reluctant to think that's a good idea. I can't help it, man. Sorry.
I very much, feel that, and I feel the fear around that as a liberal, but also looking into the way that we enforce defamation. Obviously, you understand this a lot better than I do, which is, why it's important to kind of pitch it before I put it out there.
Yeah.
It's like, it does seem like pretty good measures are made to ensure that something is in fact defamation. If it's not someone's honest opinion, if it's not a case that someone posted something defamatory but didn't know it was defamatory, if it's something that is arguably true, this, that and the other. So, the way I can definitely see how it could be abused if someone decided to corrupt it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that not all defamation cases are carried quite the way they're supposed to be. The 10 points around the public interest thing are just kind of a matter of squabbling and debate.
Yeah.
But I can also see that it is quite robust how they tend to determine if something is defamation, and I think they would have quite a hard time if they wanted to use that tyrannically to be able to justify that something was defamation that really isn't. The way it seems to be practiced seems to be quite fair, which is why I see it as maybe a safe area for making criminalized. Otherwise, I'm just struggling to see how do we hold really rich media companies that money can't hurt to account for lying.
The way we do it is by not reading them. Because they rely on your business. This is the thing. We're going to have to be savvy consumers here, and accept that the Daily Mail simply isn't fit to be read. It's one of those things. They require, like you say, they need money. They get money from advertisers. Well, let's deny them that. Let's deny them the impressions that we give them when we look at their things. And that's I think the only thing that we as consumers can actually do. And I, as an individual who's been smeared by the media, I'll take legal action where I can. But I mean, it's going to have to be a cultural change away from this kind of disgusting journalism.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, so you often hear the statement from particular groups, make the personal political, or the personal is political. I've always kind of disagreed with this statement on the grounds of if the personal's political, then that gives the politics a right to interfere with your personal life. I was just wondering how you would see that statement kind of thing was.
Just make sure it's working. Yes, I agree with that. I think that the slogan "the personal is political" is very, very dangerous because it breaks the wall between the public and the private, and allows the entry of politics into parts of everyday life where politics has no business being. I mean, there's a place for politics. Politics is important, and all these people who want to depoliticize everything and make it technocratic, they're kidding themselves. Yeah. But there are certainly places where politics shouldn't reach. You know, there is nothing worse than a pleasant barbecue on a summer's afternoon ruined by people having a few too many drinks and then they have a massive political argument. There is a rule. There is a reason why we used to have the social rule about no sex, no religion, no politics. And you think, well, what else is there to talk about? But the reason that rule existed was that by shunting everyone off so they talked about the cricket, it meant that you didn't have these enormous arguments that destroyed everybody's social time. Yeah. So yes, I actually have long considered the idea that the personal is political to be a very dangerous slogan, and I don't know where they got it from, because traditionally, traditional feminism was to try to stop people, to try to stop the state interfering in women's lives, and then you've got this slogan that says, well, let's interfere in everybody's life then.
Yeah.
So yes, I agree. I've always thought that's a fair criticism.
Could I just say, we've just been through local elections. Now, I do not like that phrase, politicising, because I feel that people get into local politics because they care. They want to do something at a local level for the neighbourhood. That means that they want to help elderly people who are actually struggling to get housing benefit, and they want to take their issues directly to the council at a district council level. They care that individuals are represented and their opinions are felt at the local council. Take it the next stage up, they care that their roads are looked at to have all the potholes filled. They care that the county council does a good job on spending the allowance that is given to them, A, by the taxpayer, and B, by the central government. And then you take it on to MEPs, all representatives. All representatives come in with their opinions. They come in with their points of view. Now, if those are political, if you view them as political, fair enough. I believe very strongly that they are the views that they hold, and they want to represent the people who are voting for them, and then in turn to represent their constituents, whether it be at whatever level. And for that, they all get their allowances, and some would term their salaries. But that's my interpretation of it. So the politics of it is dependent upon which group you join. The individual makes that choice when they decide to stand. And I would encourage everybody here, you've got Taunton District, you've got Taunton Town Council. If anybody feels that they want to get involved in the local council, stand for it. And then go out and distribute and try and get people who hold similar views to you, vote for you. Make use of the system rather than complain about it.
So I guess this is my speciality, my wheelhouse, as it were. And Tony makes a great point. The whole point of politics, the whole point of party politics is self-association. You as an individual get to decide how you're going to politically engage. But as soon as someone says, well, the person is political, what they're saying is they have a right to interfere in your personal life, and because your personal life is their politics, this is the bedrock of identity politics, and why identity politics in and of itself is tyrannical and totalitarian, because there's never a time when you're not the things that you are, the things that you do. This is what you are. You live this all day, every day. And if someone has a political opinion on your personal life, what they're saying is they have the authority to consider all of you as an individual, to be a political actor at any time that they have some sort of right to dictate over. You can no longer just freely associate. It's the end of party politics. It's the end of your ability to actually join a party and be political in your own time. It's the end of your personal life. And as you can imagine, that's a real boon to people who want to do politics that way, but to the regular person who doesn't want to do politics that way, that's honestly, I think, really the end of liberal politics, democratic politics as we understand it, because it reduces everyone to be a part of a group, and the entire group has been politicized. So there's no escaping what you are, there's no changing your mind. It doesn't matter what you think, it doesn't matter what you believe, and it doesn't matter what you want. You have all of this decided for you by the identity politicians who wish to politicize every aspect of your being. It's the most pernicious way of doing politics I can even imagine, and it's the way that the Nazis did politics. It's the way that the Soviets do politics. It's the way that we should not do politics. So whenever someone comes along and says, by the way, the person is political, therefore You've got to reject that line of reasoning outright. It's dangerous, and it only leads to a bad place. That's my opinion.
Well, I've got the poster finally.
Oh, excellent. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. And in the freedom of expression, I decided to do this poster in order to actually show people that it isn't just words and media out there that is a freedom of expression. Art is too.
Yep.
And if you can't express that in the end of the day, you're just not going to be able to express anything in your life. So I am just going to come over here, if that's okay, to give this to you.
Of course.
I really do hope you enjoy it.
Thank you.
It's got a lot of tasty memes.
Is he allowed to open it and show it to everyone now?
Go for it.
Am I going to be in trouble with the Daily Mail tomorrow?
I hope not.
I might need some instructions.
Hang on.
So that it can
I
be
think it's on the
stored.
side. Like you go like this up here.
So I've got a habit of just tearing things open.
And it's in there. I think you'll greatly appreciate Debate Me Fabian on the mug.
Well, now show it to the camera so that everybody gets.
All right. I thought it was quite a saucy thing to do.
Fabian!
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That is honestly amazing. Thank you so much. I can't tell you how much I appreciate that, and I can't wait to put that up on my wall when I get home. I've got you can't see it in the videos that I make.
Sorry, I've just read the tagline.
It's true.
What is it? What does it say?
It's all true. So great.
The tagline is hashtag I want to game, but England needs me.
Where is the
Thank
lie?
you so much. Thank you. That is just, honestly, that is so great. I honestly thank you so much.
He'd rather be playing Fortnite. I hope that's
not
what you
Fortnite.
like.
Good grief.
I don't know what you like.
I'd rather be playing Rome Total War.
Okay, fair enough.
But instead, because and again, it comes down to the personal and political. They won't leave you alone. There's no aspect of your life that they will leave you alone in. And we're seeing this in every single sort of online community and online space at the moment. It's all becoming politicized regarding identity politics. I don't want to have to talk about these sort of political issues when I'm trying to play a video game, or when you're trying to enjoy a comic, or when you're trying to watch a movie or a TV series. And they won't ever leave you alone, because they consider your private life their political domain, and we have to resist that. But would you like to ask a question? Great.
Yeah, come over.
Cool, thank you. Hi, so I got a couple of questions. So firstly, I'd just like to say thank you so much for all of your content and everything that you do. I'm a massive fan. I've only been a fan of yours for about 6-7 months, and you sort of came in a collection of lots of other sort of YouTubers that sort of got me a bit red pill. But I voted Remain, and I always sort of would describe myself as sort of like left of centre, because that's sort of what feels I'm a good person and everything like that. Yeah. So that was just sort of my assumption until I sort of did start looking more into things. From what I understand, you used to be a bit of a lefty.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, sort of what sort of turned your sort of political journey, I suppose, to get you to where you are.
Well, yeah, that's a good question. And the thing is, I don't consider myself right wing. Still,
No.
I consider myself very centrist.
I'm sent on. Centrist.
There are some things on the right that are true. There are some things on the left that are true. Like the sort of the left wing drive for fairness and equality. I do think that's important. It is important for us to not raise one person above all the rest. But the problem that I have with the left is that the current radical incarnation of it seem to decide that any borders or boundaries are a form of oppression, and they all have to be smashed. And that, to me, just sounds like chaos. And from the other side, the right, I agree that order and structure and stability are important, but these, like Jordan Peterson is always saying, these can easily become tyrannical, And I think in this country we actually do a fairly good job of holding our structures to account, our institutions to account. And so there are definitely things on the right that are also true, and that I do think that both sides need a fair consideration, which is why I put myself in the centre. But really, with the left stuff, it was the identitarian nature of the left. The way, I can't choose any particular point at which I was like, right, that's just too far. But I remember just watching it keeping on going, and the people who are the sort of cultural force and produce the cultural force for this were unbelievably horrible. You're just really disrespectful, really like unempathetic people, you know, and they decided, no, that's it. Men are oppressing women. This is the way it's always been, and this is the way it always will be, unless we smash the patriarchy. And I'm just like, what the hell are you talking about? You know, it looks like women are free in this country to do as they please, and that's how it should be, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't agree with their representation of the world. I don't agree that the fact that you're born into your gender is a form of oppression. You know, I don't agree. It's, you know, I don't agree with just the things that they say. And then I started going down to like the sort of first principles, and they seem to think that the concept of liberty is a problem. And I think the concept of liberty is what makes this country what it is. So.
No, exactly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Sorry, I did have one more.
Yeah,
sorry.
please. Yeah.
Just like this might not be something that you know particularly loads about, but I'd just like to get your
that's why I've got Helen with me.
thoughts on it. Well, it's to do with one of UKIP's policies actually.
Oh, right, okay.
I agree with pretty much all of their manifesto, just except this one little bit in their sort of environment section where they say that they sort of want to bring back coal and sort of stop green initiatives and stuff like that. And like that's like the only thing, and I think that would stop a lot of young people from sort of going over to them. So I know you probably aren't in charge of like making the policies.
No, I didn't write the manifesto.
But yeah, I just wanted sort of your opinions on that.
My personal opinion is that I don't agree that we should bring back coal. But again, this is not necessarily representative of the people in the party, and I'm sure they've got good rationale for doing this. But I'm personally of the opinion that the environmental campaigners have a lot of really valid points.
Yeah.
I mean, I personally find plastic bags disgusting. I you know, the 5p tax just isn't enough because I'll just pay that 5p.
Yeah.
You know, I want to have either like paper or cotton or whatever, you know, hemp is you know, exactly all of these things that are politically off the table at the moment, but you know that they'd make a lot of sense if we would just get over this hump. And so yeah, when it comes to like power stations, I think nuclear is the best option.
Yeah, me too.
And I'm sick of these like green campaigns going, well, maybe. It's like, yeah, you know it is. You know it's a clean form of energy, and you know we can do whatever we need to do with disposing of the waste products of it, and we'll pay whatever we have to pay to make that safe or whatever it is we have to do. But it seems like a very common sense solution to energy problems. And like I say, with the green campaigners, I don't see why they had to shut down London to get their concerns heard, because I think they had some really valid concerns. Like I would love to see just get microplastics out of the environment as much as we can. If that requires us to ban plastic bottles and plastic bags, okay, fine. We'll just go to paper bags and glass bottles. Something recyclable, something that doesn't destroy the environment. We live in the environment. Why wouldn't we want it to be nice?
Yeah, I figured they could have sort of used the free market. They could have mass boycotted shops or something. They could have they could have campaigned for compost in your schools or to reduce stuff. But they just went there and sort of
but then I mean, a lot of people, I think, when they see them protesting in this way, go, well, I'm not going to accept that form of protest, and you never get to hear the legitimate arguments. And I actually went down there, and because I was in London at the time, and I'd never heard of this group. I'd never heard of them, and so this was a complete shock to me. And so I just asked them, and they were actually fairly reasonable about what they were saying. I mean, a lot of stuff. They had some kooky, we're going to get rid of every form of power station, and we'll be wall to wall, solar panels and windmills. Unrealistic, obviously, but there are concrete goals that we could achieve, banning plastic bags and all this sort of thing, like small steps that would have noticeably good effects. And I really think that we should do that. I don't see why we would resist that. I think that's a good idea.
Cool, awesome. Thank you.
Thank
Cheers.
you. Right, are there any people on the sort of margins who have stopped to listen who would like to ask us any questions? I'm Carl Benjamin. I'm running for the United Kingdom Independence Party to be the regional Southwest MEP, and I'm here just answering questions from anyone who wants to ask. If anyone's got any concerns or questions, or if they disagree with me on anything, I'd love to hear from you guys. I'll assume that everyone agrees with me and nobody votes Labour.
I think they might be saying that you can go home. Oh no, a lady's got a follow up.
Please, yeah.
Yeah, follow up. I thought about while I was thinking about other things. Like you, I'm broadly supportive of free speech, especially in the political sphere. I don't think any topic should be off limits for discussion. When I think about how the free speech legislation's constructed, it's objective, not subjective, and it depends on the person who feels they've been the victim to say that a crime has been committed. Broadly speaking, I'm not in favour of that definition, but I may have found a little exception, if you'll indulge me.
Yeah.
So I've got a little scenario for you. So just say you have a group of people, they have mental health problems, they're doing a project on public land, they've got all the permissions, councillor with them. Broadly speaking, everybody supports what's going on. And one individual approaches this group of people with mental health problems, and it's very loud, very obnoxious. It's not violent, doesn't touch anybody, but these people can't handle that level of what they perceive as aggression, and some of them are quite traumatised by it. How would you handle that if you were able to alter free speech legislation?
That doesn't fall under, it's not speech. Depending on the circumstances, the person who's loud and annoying may be creating a public nuisance or a private nuisance. Once again, there's a range of different circumstances. If it's public land, it's likely to be a public nuisance. Nuisance is a tort. That's a civil wrong. You'll have heard of other torts. Negligence. Everyone's heard of negligence. The person who slips over in Tesco's and because Tesco's didn't mop water up off the floor, that kind of thing. And I'm not blaming Tesco. I'm just picking a supermarket chain for the point of a supermarket chain. But yes, in those circumstances, it can fall under the head of tort. And the reason it can look like a speech issue is because in certain circumstances it's harassment. And whilst harassment can be a crime, it can also be a tort. And it's, we already have ample common law principles. These are the common law torts present in the legal system to deal with that. It doesn't actually typically intersect with speech at all.
Oh, well, thank you for clearing that up for me then.
I'm so glad you're here.
Local solicitors' bread and butter, that one.
Excellent.
Hello, Carl.
Hello.
And, okay, tough question. With regard to Tommy Robinson standing as an independent in the North East and the behaviour that's been directed at him and seems orchestrated from organisations like Hope Not Hate, and how they kind of gradate into Antifa and all of these hard leftist and violent organisations. How do you think moving forward into the future that we can maintain their rights to have their free speech, but then muzzle them in a certain way that it remains as speech and doesn't drift over into violence, especially when they've got what look to be like quite clandestine links into the BBC with the John Sweeney thing. So we have to maintain their right to freedom of speech, but we can't allow them to then become violent and intimidate people. So how do you think moving forward that we'd be able to do that at a societal level?
Well, I can feel Helen watching me intensely for my answer on this. I think there is no doubt that Antifa are a violent organisation. That's the express purpose of them, and they're very public about saying it, and their supporters will go out and say this because they feel that they are effectively fighting for the establishment, which means that they don't get the kind of backlash from the powers that be that, well, civil, free speech activists do. There are a list of prescribed groups in this country, and I personally would add Antifa to them. The idea that they're anything other than violent communist thugs is ridiculous to me. You never see them doing anything else.
No, indeed.
But of course, anyone who wants to speak about the subjects they're speaking about, of course, should be free to do so. The last thing we should be doing is criminalising political opinions. But the Antifa supporters and the actual members, they are actually inciting violence where they aren't doing it themselves. And I think that there's a real... And I think this is something that Helen talks about often, is the issue of class in this country, because you'll notice that the members of these groups tend to be university educated, middle class,
Absolutely.
very socially progressive, and very in line, in lockstep with the current establishment order. They are in fact attacking people who they think are threatening this, and unfortunately for them, they don't have the right to simply attack people in public because they disagree with their opinions, even if these people are saying these opinions in whatever way they want, wherever they want.
Yeah.
So that's personally how I feel about it, but Helen now can tell me off.
No, you're pretty close.
Well, they're criminal acts,
the
aren't
way
they?
the
I mean, you
law
can't be
the law
violent.
is supposed to work
Yeah.
is that speech is free, violence is not. And you must, and if you're going to fight for anything in the rule of law, you must fight for keeping that division as bright and as clear as possible. People can say what they jolly well like, but they can't just go around punching people. And it was once again the secret barrister who made the point about the milkshake incident being tossed over Tommy Robinson, and I think it's happened to other people as well.
Yeah.
And he just made the point very simply in a tweet. You defeat your political opponents at the ballot box. You do not do stuff like this. You do not chuck things at them. You do not try to hit them. You don't try to intimidate them. You defeat your political opponents at the ballot box. That is why we have it. Democracy was developed in every civilization that has developed a form of democracy, whether it's direct, like in Athens, or representative, like here, or the kind or constitutional republicanism in the United States. Yeah. Every civilization that has developed democracy has done it for the same reason. It is for the orderly and peaceful transfer of power. Because what people did before democracy was when they won, they cut their opponents' heads off, or worse. That's why we have democracy now, and that's why it's very important that it, be respected. So, the core of my Leave support since the vote, as opposed to the actually at the time, is that no, this is like a general election. You don't say, oh no, the wrong party won the general election, let's do it over. That way lies madness, and also a gross undermining of what democracy is for. Lots of people have got silly ideas in their head that it's going to give you a perfect answer, or that it means that all people are satisfied at the end of the night. No, it's not. It's so that we don't solve our political problems by chopping off our opponents' heads.
Indeed.
Or putting them on pikes. The French chop heads off, the English put them on pikes. The Scots hit them with a claymore. It's just...
What happened, though, with Tommy Robinson does provoke a deeper and darker question about what's happening at the moment in the UK. If you can get a month in prison for throwing an egg at Jeremy Corbyn, shouldn't you also get a month in prison for chucking a milkshake over Tommy Robinson?
Yes.
And if that doesn't happen, does that then point towards the notion, and I tread carefully with my words here, that the police are becoming in some way politicised? Because if they are, then we're no longer being policed by consent. If they have a bias, if it's a month in prison for throwing an egg at Tommy Robinson, and simply, well, hey, we had that guy, the barrister, going, oh, I want to chuck a milkshake over Tommy Robinson too, then that seems to prove that there's a clear delineation between what kind of political speech is allowed and which kind of political speech isn't allowed, or reactions to political speech. And that's very dangerous ground to tread on, isn't it?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. And I think that the politicization of our institutions is one of the things that I've put it on the leaflets that are being handed out. This is something I'm so concerned about.
Yeah.
I mean, the best example I can think of is I think it's the police in Bedfordshire, where they have pride flags on their police cars.
Yeah.
Now, I'm a complete supporter of gay rights, gay marriage, and I always have been. I'm a secular atheist. I see absolutely no justification why that shouldn't be the case. However, I do not want to see the police having an opinion on this, because there are Muslim mums in Birmingham who would disagree.
Of course.
It's a political question. It's not something that's just ideologically neutral. The police should have no opinion on it. And the fact that, there are so many videos of the police speaking to Tommy Robinson. Now, you don't have to like the man, but the police should not be giving their opinions on him. They should not be mocking him. They should not be teasing him in public. This is them abandoning the initial principles on which the police force was even founded. founded.
Absolutely.
The impartiality of our institutions is what makes this country a good country, and we're losing that, and it's being done subversively. And you'll see like the kind of groupthink on the left, where like the Independent will pump out a bunch of articles saying, the top 5 hilarious reactions to Tommy Robinson getting milkshake thrown on him, as if this isn't a deeply concerning turn of events.
Absolutely.
And again, it's if you don't believe in impartiality for the people you don't like, then you just believe in partiality for the people you do like, and that's the antithesis of democratic politics. That's going to lead us back into the sort of dark days of political violence. It's not now a neutral ground where people can make political arguments. Now it's about rival gangs.
Yeah.
And it's who's got the most knives. And I really don't want to go down that road.
Well, we've seen in America situations, certainly in Portland, where it seems that the police have taken, and not just the police, but the mayoralty in the town have taken a side, and Antifa are just allowed to run riot pretty much.
America does not have policing by consent, though. I mean, the Peel's principles of policing that you're quoting, and where the public are the police and the police are the public, is one of the reasons why the police are still in this country largely disarmed. And I mean, Americans find this hysterical, and also they're also amazed by it. So what does the British policeman do when someone runs away from him? It's sort of like he waves his nightstick and says, "Stop," or I'll yell, "Stop," again.
Stop in the name of the law.
But yes, the United States, there are serious problems with police in the United States, and I don't like to compare policing in America with Britain. I don't even like to compare Australian policing with Britain, because Australia's police are armed, and whilst they're much better in quality than the police in the US,
of course,
they don't have the same traditions of Peel's. They don't have Peelite principles the way the police do here.
Yep.
So, I mean, that to me is the loss of the Peelite principles that underlie the police force is very dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, one of the things that bothers me is it starts turning the police, rather than the protectors of your rights and the enforcers of the law, into a more sort of ethical organization. And I really think that's to the detriment of the police. It's not their job to impose a kind of moral order on the public. That's not their job.
Yeah.
Like you were saying, the Peel's principles, the whole point was that we can police by consent, because we're not going to say we dislike you because of the things you believe or what you are or what you do or anything. We are going to expressly be rigid to this code of conduct and this code of rules and these 9 principles, that it doesn't matter who you are. It's the anonymization of the public to the police. You know, so there is no particular partiality there. So you can be sure, as best we can, that you are going to get fair treatment from them. And again, it comes back to this fairness. The whole point of this country was about fairness, and we're losing it based on the ethical agenda of, frankly, the radical left.
Yeah.
You know, the equality at all costs crowd. You know, equality at the cost of fairness. This has to be resisted, and the ideological corruption of our institutions. It should be on everyone's lips.
No,
you know,
absolutely.
why are our police not being neutral?
Well, I mean, there are certain people that I suppose you could put it under a conspiracy theory, that we know that the police have spent lots of money with common purpose.
Well, Cressida Dick is probably the person who's most responsible for this. Rather, we don't need a conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
We can name names. I mean,
absolutely.
You can see from like any interview she does with the BBC that she has an ethical agenda for the police and how to change the way that policing is done in this country. And I don't think she's the person for it.
Their motto is to lead beyond authority. That's what it says on their website.
Whatever that means.
Lead beyond authority. Well, it seems to me to be a brazen. Wanting to say overstep the mark.
Absolutely.
If you don't have the authority to act in a certain area, who cares? Because we're all together and we're all cultural Marxists, and we're just going to steamroller everything in front of us.
This puts us worryingly close to like Mussolini's idea of an ethical state.
Indeed.
The state telling the citizens how they should be, rather than just being the night watchman that Mussolini was complaining about. I want the night watchman. You know, it was the fascists that didn't. They wanted their ethical state, and we're seeing the same thing from the radical left.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's really something that has to be talked about. It really is.
Yeah, indeed.
Thank you for bringing it up.
No,
I really appreciate it.
problem.
The question I was going to ask was pretty much asked already by the guy before me, so I thought I'd have a follow-up. As the police are now so utterly corrupt and either will persecute you illegally or not protect you as they should do because of their political opinions, what legal repercussions do normal people have when the police act out of line? So it's probably a question to the lawyer. Is there any sort of precedent within common law that the ordinary people can act in a way to protect themselves when the state and the police itself are illegal and criminal?
Well, I would probably...
Whilst there are problems with policing, I would not suggest that we are at that point in this country. And that's going to sound terribly establishment, but I can assure you I have been in countries where the police are corrupt. I grew up in a part of Australia under a particular Australian premier who was corrupt and whose police force was notorious for its corruption. And I actually watched my father bailing Aboriginal employees out of the lockup. And this involved the handing over of sums of money, so bribery. We are not there in this country. I know it can feel like that because of the availability heuristic. You see the Tommy Robinson stories, or you see some of the other reporting of what happened in Rotherham, that kind of thing, and it can look like the institution is failing, but it's actually not. It's mostly working. If it were failing as badly as some people think, then it wouldn't look like the United Kingdom, but it would look like Queensland in circa 1980, and I can assure you it's not, because I was in Queensland in 1980.
Yeah. I think that generally the British people have a high sensitivity to that, though. I think that's what why the gentleman's using quite strong language, because I agree. I'm not part of the establishment, but I don't believe the police are quite as far gone as you're concerned about. But we're on the wrong road, and we're stepping down that path. And I agree that we need to address it. But sorry, carry on.
Yeah, no, that's basically all I was going to say. Believe me, if you travel to the developing world, you will see what bad policing is. And if you don't want to go to the developing world, if you still want to go to a country where you can get 3 hots and a cot and have a nice time, just go to the United States if you want to see absolutely ruinously bad policing. And you don't even have to pick on Portland. You can just about go anywhere.
Well, we're going to Chicago later in the year, so...
Oh, Chicago, great.
Okay, then as a sort of a follow-up, what can we do as normal people to stop the police deteriorating? What could UKIP do, for example, to make...
That's for you.
Well, I think primarily table this issue. Make sure that this is what they have to talk about. We can raise this. I mean, I'll raise this in the European Parliament if I go there. I'll make sure that they're aware that we know that these things are happening. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, what can an MEP really do? It's the best I think that I could do with the position. But if I were forming a government and I had a mandate to actually be able to do something about this, I would set up various inquiries. I would find out exactly what's going on, and I would have whatever it is I could do, whatever action I could take to restore the neutrality of the police in these regards. I absolutely would. I'm very, very tired. I mean, like, the case of Harry the Limerick criminal is the most...
Harry the Owl.
Yeah,
oh
Harry the Owl.
God.
Yeah, the Limerick criminal, right? You may not be familiar with this, but it was a chap called Harry. I think we can reasonably call him a TERF, if that's a fair...
Harry is a docker from Liverpool. I don't know... I think he might know what TERF means.
Yes.
I don't think he knew at the time what TERF meant when he did this, but he probably does now.
Yeah, so I think he's a feminist, but he's a gender essentialist feminist. So he believes that your gender role is informed by your biological reality, which is, I think, a common opinion that most people hold. Harry had committed the high crime of liking a limerick on Twitter. He didn't even retweet it or said it himself. He liked it, and this the context, the body of this limerick was it was a joke against transgender people, saying that they were confused and didn't really know what they were doing, and that your biological gender is informed by your sex. He received a visit from his local constabulary, saying, and on the premise that they wanted to, quote, check his thinking.
We're just checking out your thinking,
in regards to transgender issues. Now, I'm sure I don't have to be everyone's well aware that the police are not educated on the subject. They do not know the ins and outs of the debate, and they should not have an opinion on this, because what Harry had done was not illegal. But this goes back into what I was saying about the ethical police force. They don't now just protect his right to speak. Now they're actually interested in what it is he's saying, and that is the real problem. And that is exactly the kind of worrying thing that I think you're speaking to.
Yeah.
And that's exactly the kind of issue that I will be putting on the table if I'm elected to any kind of position anywhere ever. This stuff has to stop. It has to.
So you agree that we must make the police and the courts accountable again?
Yes, I totally agree.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks again. Carl, yeah, this is for you, Carl. Are you aware of any of the controversy around the benefits system? And does UKIP have any plans to help reform it?
I'm personally not familiar with the controversy around the benefit system. Would you like to tell me what's happened?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it started under Ian Duncan Smith, who decided to reform the benefit system to farm it out to private practice. He then spent 3 years going through the courts to keep a government report secret because it highlighted how many people had died since being declared fit for work.
Right.
The benefit system itself, Department of Work and Pensions, personal and dependence payments, it came out quite recently that they had an internal target of approving only 15% of the claims that crossed their desk. When that happened, a person could go for an internal review, which 9 times out of 10 was turned down. Their option after that was to go to an external review, which is a court, which is held before a barrister, a doctor of medicine, and a disability rights advisor. Bearing in mind that only 15% of claims were ever approved, the overturn rate in this area alone is between 70 and 85%. And like I said, these tribunals have actually made people's health problems worse.
Yeah.
They haven't actually helped.
Well, the way the Conservatives have been managing this is broadly disgraceful. I mean, the amount of people that you've seen, undoubtedly you've seen the newspaper articles, you know, this person who is essentially a skeleton at this point has been declared fit for work, or cancer patients who have been declared fit for work is unreal. And you can tell, that, like you're saying, it's coming from a position where they have a target to hit and must hit that at any cost, rather than actually having the institution doing its job properly, because it's about money. Now, I'm of the opinion that mass immigration is definitely contributing to the strain on our social services. I think it would be illogical to suggest that it's not. And I think that what they're effectively running into is the kind of the immovable object and the unstoppable force, where you've come to a position where you have to maintain this institution, but you also have an unstoppable pressure on the institution that's making it buckle. It can't do what it's supposed to do. And so what they're doing is saying, right, well, we'll only do 15% of the target, and therefore everything else must be okay. And that is dangerous. That's harmful to people who need these services, and it's defeating the object of having the services in the first place.
I know. I know of people personally whose health problems have been made a lot worse because of the system, because it's just not giving them breathing space.
It has to be said that benefit sanctions directed at all people, not just disabled, benefit sanctions are what is driving food bank use.
Yes,
you can actually, because they tend to be done geographically, you can actually watch from region to region when a whole area gets sanctioned, and if you then monitor food bank use afterwards, there's a spike in food bank use afterwards. I mean, this situation led me to support me personally in policy terms, and also quite a few people at the Adam Smith Institute, actually, which is a free market think tank, to support a negative income tax, which is basically a system of adjusted payments that you get depending on your income, so it can support people who are in the gig economy and that kind of thing. But the rationale is to just get rid of sanctions, full stop, because we now know that they lead to food bank use. That is just incontrovertible, as well as all these other social problems as well.
Sanctions lead to death.
Yeah.
People have died because of sanctions. And speaking of food banks, job centres used to refer people directly to food banks. Amber Rudd's now stopped that, so people have now got to go to the CAB to be referred to food banks, because they didn't like the fact that the statistics about being referred to food banks was tied to benefits.
How could it be any other way?
Exactly, exactly.
And then well, you've got, like, Ian Duncan Smith is a great example. This is the man who said, anyone can live on £50 a week, said the millionaire. It's like, well, his opinion on how much you need to live on is really rather irrelevant, because he's never going to have to do it.
He's talking out the hole in his trousers.
Of course he is. And when challenged on doing it, he said, well, no, of course, this is just a stunt. Of course I'm not going to do that. It's like, that's because it's unbelievably
do it, mate.
difficult.
Do it.
Exactly.
I'd like to see that.
I've been unemployed. I've had to live off benefits before. It's not an easy life.
No, it's
at
not.
all.
No, it's not. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm quite new to just being a UKIP supporter, because I'm just fed up of a lot of these parties just talking about the same issues, having the same views, and I just want something that represents me. I don't work, I can't work, but I feel like I'm just not being represented at all by the main parties. But also something I've really noticed is people like me is, what are the House of Lords doing? Why do we need them? Do we elect them? No. Should we elect them? Yes. Yes, they are experts in their field, and they probably very much have a right to say these things and be part of these laws, like as much as everyone is. But should we reform them? Should we actually listen to the people and what they want?
Thankfully, I have a legal expert here. So,
Yeah.
Helen, would you like to explain the House of Lords to everyone, please?
Well, the House of Lords was historically the aristocratic house, and its members were members of the aristocracy. And whilst there are still a few aristocrats, Tony Blair reformed it, as I think everybody knows. So the peers are now appointed, and they're appointed roughly proportionally to a political party's representation in the Parliament, which means it's become a place of superannuated political hacks. And no, they're not elected, and they're about as much use as a chocolate teapot.
So what do you think we should do with the House of Lords?
I mean, I worked for a senator in Australia, in a country with two houses of equal power. The Senate can do everything except initiate money bills in Australia. And it's elected proportionally, so the composition is different from the House of Representatives, which is elected on a constituency basis like the Commons. And it means that the people in the House of Representatives actually have to do their jobs. But if you go to a elected House of Lords on a proportional basis, which in many respects is more intensely democratic than a constituency basis with first past the post, understand that it will change your political system irrevocably, and it will probably break things. The Fixed Term Parliaments Act is an example of a piece of legislation that broke things, because baked into the constitutional architecture of this country was the idea that the Prime Minister could go to the Queen and call a snap election for anything. You can't really do that now. So you've had this constant mess in the Commons with trying to call Corbyn, trying to get an election to happen. And in a normal world, he would have been able to do so, but he can't now. So I think you need an elected upper house. There is a very good model in the Australian system, but you need to understand that if you do that, because you're not Australia, because you're a different country, because you have different heritage and traditions and political background and all of those things, you need to understand it will break a lot of things. It may make things better, but initially it will break things.
I think there are probably going to be a lot of people who come from the position, and it's a very, very British position, that things that have value are things that are old. And I think they'll look at the House of Lords and say, well, this is something we've inherited from the past. You know, it's been there a long time, and it's part of the kind of structure of the political life of the United Kingdom, and they'll be afraid of tampering with it on that basis alone.
And that's actually that's the traditional articulation of conservatism. That's a very good reason. If it isn't broken, don't fix it.
But it is broken.
But it probably is broken, although that said, the thing that broke it was not the fact that it's not elected, was not the fact that it's a avenue for pork barrelling and silliness and all of these things. The thing that broke it was actually the Blairite reforms, which turned it into a house of superannuated hacks. You know, but the thing is, it's very hard to get up in public and say, actually, no, we should put the aristocrats back in there. They were better. It's really hard to make that argument now.
That's correct. It is, isn't it? I mean, you know, who makes an argument for pro-aristocracy? You know, so
I'm not sure I'd want the gig.
No, I don't think I'd want that either. I really don't think that's what I'm aiming for. You know what I mean? So, but thanks for coming out, and thanks for giving us a question. And you know,
that's a good question.
Yeah, it was an excellent question.
That's the kind of question you get on a third year constitutional law exam, and you have all these students sitting in schools for 3 hours writing an essay about it.
But I'm totally with you about not feeling represented by any of the other parties. That's why I joined UKIP. That's why I'm doing anything I'm doing. I don't feel like any of them represent it. I think they represent a particular kind of attitude from London, and I'm not from London. I don't live there, and I don't really want to be represented by them.
Hi. Sorry, I'm a bit new to public speaking, so bear with me.
Same here.
Oh God. Yeah, my main question was about regarding uni students. As someone who's at university, what is your advice for people that are on the conservative, more right-wing spectrum? Because the advice I generally get off people is keep your head down, shut up, don't draw attention. And I don't really accept that advice because I did that in first year and it was horrible. So I don't really want to do that again. So I just wondered if you had any advice for students in that situation that are covert conservatives.
Yeah, I mean that was actually the advice I give out as well, because the problem with the problem with universities, and it's not all universities obviously, but it's some universities with particularly active and again radical leftist types, the kind of people with the ethical agenda. They will do everything they can to make your life hell. If they think that you're not on board with their agenda, and you don't have to, they won't do it to someone who's just walking around, but you have to show any kind of opposition to what they're saying. If they can't win you over in the first minute or two, that's it. You're an enemy. You're a fascist. You're evil. You know, you're part of the problem. You're part of the patriarchy that has to be smashed.
Yeah.
Honestly, I mean, on the plus side, at least I think UKIP is the one party in the country that's aware of this, and we saw this with Sebastian Walsh. We fundraised for him because he was an openly UKIP supporter in his university, and they came for him, and they'll do that to anyone else who stands up. So, I mean, thankfully, we are creating a kind of social structure here where we are aware of what's going on, and we're going to support one another in this. But I mean, if you're just like a lone individual in a university and you're just doing your thing, I mean, honestly, I think the best advice for the moment is just keep your head down. But we're doing, everything we can to just change the culture of these places, change the culture of the country. So we have to stop persecuting people for having different opinions. We really do. Yeah. The second thing I would recommend is when you find other dissidents in these universities, just make friends with them. Become, be aware of one another, and if they need some help, help them out. And then if you need help, they'll help you out. It's the best we can do at the moment, but things will change, I promise.
Yeah, no.
Is there a conservative?
Oh, can I ask you why? Well, what can I talk to you about that? I'd love to. Yeah. Well, hang on.
I just want to ask. Yes, I want to ask the other lady a question. Do you have a Conservatives Association at your university?
Well, sorry. Excuse me. Why?
We do
why
have
are we
a
racist
few.
though?
I haven't.
Why?
I forgot to join this year, but we do have a few groups that I'd be interested to sort of talk
Come and
to.
talk to
I
us.
have
Go
I have
along to some
spoken
of
to
their
people in
meetings.
sort of seminars and lectures and built up a little bit of a few lads that I talk to, and we can sort of talk about it.
But yeah, I mean, look, I when I was at university, I was at ALCA, Oxford University Conservative Association. I don't know which university you're at, and I'm not expecting you to drop them in it, but there should be a Conservative Association at least at your university, student association. They'll have drinks nights and things like that. Go along to that to start with. You'll meet a few friends there. Yeah. There are like-minded people, and the student associations are often the best place to start.
Yeah, no, I have found some. It's more that we're very covert about it, and they are conscious of people, of talking about it even in front of other students. They'll sort of say, can you keep your voice down when we're talking about it? And it's not good.
It's often because the administration themselves is staffed by people who have this radical left agenda, and so they get.
I thought she asked before the other lady walked across. I thought she deserved a decent answer.
Yes, absolutely. Sorry, I apologise as well. But no, you've got to be sensible. Don't do anything that gives them reason, because whenever you give them a reason to come down on you, they're going to hit you with everything they can.
Oh yeah,
so
definitely.
Good luck.
Yeah, I'm going to need it.
Thank you. I really want to know why.
There's always one.
Well, that's the thing. Like,
I invite you to. Tell me why I'm the racist.
Do you want me to ask if she wants to talk to the candidate?
Yes.
Do you want to talk to the candidate? He's sitting here.
Yeah,
hello.
You have an
Rather
opportunity.
than engaging with members of the public, do you want to talk to the candidate?
Excuse me. I'd like to know why you think what you think. I might be persuaded otherwise.
You are intolerating our opinion by not listening to us.
The candidate is here if you wish to speak to the candidate.
Do you want us to listen to you? Speak to us.
I think she's walking off.
Speak to us if you want us to listen to you. We're here waiting. We've given you a platform. Right, goodbye.
Well,
I'm sorry, I kind of ruined that. It's just I thought the other lady deserved a
No.
better, more of an answer to her question. That's all.
Anybody else?
Anyone who happens to agree with that lady's opinion? So I'd love to speak to them.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
just a quick question. Free speech has come up quite often today. How are we meant to entrench it? Like, should it be entrenched in public law, like with a second, like a First Amendment, like in the American Constitution? I understand like the British Constitution's uncodified. So how would this fit into British
we actually do have it written into our unwritten law. But again, Helen, you might be the person to answer that in particular.
It's not possible under the current constitutional architecture of the United Kingdom to have an entrenched constitution like they have in the United States or Australia. This is because of actually part of what people who voted leave were fighting for, because of the principle of parliamentary sovereignty. And one of the aspects of parliamentary sovereignty is that a current parliament can't bind a future parliament. So that means they can't pass a law that says all future parliaments have to follow this law and can't change it. It's one of the reasons why the fight over what form Brexit will take between Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn is so fraught, because Labour is trying to get undertakings that say the protections for worker rights won't be removed from a future Brexit. But these are undertakings that Theresa May can't give. And if the boot were on the other foot, they are also undertakings that Jeremy Corbyn can't give, because it involves binding a future parliament, which is contrary to the principle of parliamentary sovereignty.
Okay, thank you very much.
There we go.
Yeah, so like I'm a very social person, yeah, and sometimes I don't get my point across properly. So, what's your view on that stuff?
On what stuff exactly? Sorry.
Like being around people and socializing to everyone.
I think of myself as a very social person.
That's good.
I spend a lot of time hanging out with people and talking to them.
Okay, yeah.
And I think you should be free to do it in the way that you want to do it. I don't think someone else should have any kind of interference in the way you socialise.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have for today. Yeah.
It's a really difficult one, like the lady there asked. Because I've got Helen here.
Yeah, true. I feel your pain. I'm at uni as well, by the way. I feel your pain. I do. Exeter? Oh, damn it. Okay, sorry, I thought I made another Conservative friend. So my question is, do you think as a country we're losing our sense of humour?
Oh, absolutely. My God.
Yeah.
Like, this is the sort of offence archaeology that Helen's talking about, where it's directly targeting comedy itself. And, I mean, taking any statement out of context, which, again, happens to me all the time, and, especially where, obvious jokes are being taken out of context and then being treated like party political broadcasts. And it's a real shame as well, because famously, the British have had this kind of very sort of self-deprecating and quirky sense of humour that we've been very accepting of, at least in my parents' generation. It was very accepting as, even if it was a rough joke, a particularly bad joke, I mean, it was understood, but that's a joke, and something that's a joke is not a serious statement, and we carry on like that. But again, when we've come to the point where we've got all sorts of hate speech laws and the criminalisation of offence, I mean, watching what's happening to the comedy community in this country is tragic. Watching them. I mean, for example, I used David Baddiel's defence of a joke that I made. Yeah, exactly. And he is disavowing his own defence of jokes that I guess we consider very extreme jokes, on subjects that are very, very sensitive. Mm-hmm. But I think that as soon as we start doing that, then we make the subject a lot more terrifying than it actually needs to be. Agreed. And it means that we have a lot more trouble dealing with that. Because, I mean, historically, Britain was always famous for being able to deal with tragedies in a very, very sort of positive way, because we would laugh at it, Exactly. We would look at it in the face and say, look, we're not scared.
Exactly.
And we're losing that. We're really losing that. And it's a real concern of mine that the press are being allowed to essentially generate offence out of humour. Yeah. That's a line we should not cross.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because I'm very anti-racist. I hate anything like that. But I like a spicy joke, And shows like Monty Python and others like that, they wouldn't even be made. Even shows from the 90s that I like, things like Brass Eye and Dark Place and the IT Crowd. I don't even think
Brass Eye would get nowhere now. Chris Norris would be in jail.
Yes.
Exactly.
Remember that Peter Geddon?
Yes.
I know, exactly.
God.
Excellent.
Yeah, dressed as a school. Yeah.
And that was only in the 90s, you know. In my lifetime, I'm not dissimilar age to you.
Yeah.
And in my lifetime, I've seen it. When do you think that happened? Can you pinpoint when we stopped losing our sense of humour, particularly our dark sense of humour?
I think it's the people who traffic in political correctness that are the ones doing this.
Yeah.
Because obviously a joke is not politically correct. That wouldn't be funny if it was politically correct.
Precisely.
And so the people who give excessive credence to this and use it as a weapon in order to hurt their political opponents, because it is a weapon. You know, it is fascism parading as manners, as George Carlin said. And I completely agree with him on this.
Yeah.
I think he's absolutely right. He had that dead to rights, you know, back in the 80s. You know, and it's been allowed to incrementally to take over public life because it suits bureaucrats, it suits corporations, it suits them because they don't then have to worry about the fine detail and the context. They can just say, no, we've got a hard, solid line here, and we can just, you know, we're on one side, you're on the other side, and never, you know, no questions asked. We don't need to think about it any further. It's easy for them, but it ends up destroying public life in this country. It ends up destroying comedy in this country.
Whenever you go out, see. One of the things that Game of Thrones does very well is when Joffrey starts going after the fool. One of the things I mean, obviously Game of Thrones is fiction, but it's based heavily on sort of on medieval cultural practices and medieval and early modern. And the fool was given license to say things that nobody else could say as long as he was funny. And I mean, and the fool in Lear is your classic example of that. He gets to say all the things about King Lear that everybody else knows to be true, and that they can't say because it's bloody King Lear. And if the monarch, the power of the state, attacks the fool, then you know you're in trouble, and that's what Game of Thrones brings out really well. We've now reached the stage where the power of the state and the power of social opprobrium, so it's not the state, but you know, it's the tyranny of the majority, or a majority of the prevailing thought and opinion, as John Stuart
a very
Mill
loud
put it.
minority, I think it is, that's ruining it.
They're coming for the fools, the people who can get away with saying things as long as they're funny, or at least funny to a decent number of people. And that's really dangerous. That's a bad place to be.
Comedy's subjective, isn't it? So.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Well, because it basically means if you crack a joke, your joke has to land with 100% of people. And there is no comedian on this earth, even the funniest comedians, can do that.
Precisely.
It's just not possible.
Yeah.
But it's also, like, again, like, joking about things is a way of disarming them. You know, it's a way of taking the teeth out of something. And I think that's really important. And I think that if we lose that, then we make everything, we invert the dynamic of society in that way. So like, instead of now, we are confident, strong people who can handle any kind of problems that come our way. Suddenly we're infantilizing ourselves and saying, actually, we're too afraid to deal with anything.
Too afraid of the words.
Even conceptually, even just as a joke is humor. You know, we become very afraid of these things, and we give them a power over us that they simply don't deserve. I don't think that we should allow these things to dominate our lives, and yet the future we're moving into, this is exactly going to be. I can't remember who said it, but it was that the fear of the thing is usually worse than the thing itself. I think it was Machiavelli who said that. But I think he's right. You know, I think it is the fear of the thing that is generally worse than the actual thing if you look it in the face. And I think that if we take away our ability to actually joke about these things, then we become enthralled to these things, and they will control our lives in every way.
Agreed. Thank you both. Cheers.
Thank you.
Okay, well, let me see. I got a number of questions, but one thing I would like to say: has the Brexit Party ever been mentioned today?
It probably has come up. Yeah.
Okay, I suppose I'll ask something else then.
Well, you can ask about that if you'd like.
No, it's let me see. What do you think about the current voting system in this country? First past the post introduces minority rule, but proportional representation produces weak government. So, what do you actually think about that?
Well, it's the trade-off that we have to decide on, isn't it? I mean, it really depends what you want. You know, it really depends what you want. Do you want strong central rule that is always the same and you end up with a two-party duopoly, even when they're both being absolutely incompetent? I mean, we're staring a Corbyn government in the face, and nobody wants a Corbyn government, and yet we're probably going to end up with one because of first past the post. So, I mean, in circumstances like these, I think I would probably rather a weaker central government and proportional representation, because at least more people will actually be represented. And I mean, at least we'd be able to restrict the amount of damage that I think Jeremy Corbyn would be able to do, or John McDonnell in particular, given the reins. But yeah, everything's a trade-off, and I think you've summarised it very well there, in fact.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I suppose I better ask my Brexit Party question.
Yes, please.
Then. Well, do you think the Brexit Party is actually a genuine threat to UKIP?
Well, I think you'd be foolish to deny that it isn't. You know, you'd be foolish to say that it's not. I mean, obviously it is. But I think that primarily it's not going to be around forever. I think it's a single issue party, and as soon as that issue happens, you'll see what happened to UKIP. I mean, UKIP was widely perceived as a single issue party right up until the referendum, when it dropped to like 1% in the polls. You know, what would be the point of supporting a party that no longer has a mandate? But UKIP now has much more that it's concerned with, and far more like social issues and other political issues than just Brexit. I mean, obviously, there's no question of whether UKIP supports Brexit or not. But the question is, is the Brexit Party going to do anything about the erosion of free speech in universities, or the lack of accounts that our institutions are being held to, the political corruption of these institutions? And the answer is no, obviously. They're far too broad a church on one issue to be able to actually form any kind of political impetus to push against any of these issues. And these issues really do affect people on a daily basis. Like that young lady over there is afraid of just admitting that she's a conservative in her university. And that's, the Brexit Party won't do anything about that. But UKIP are concerned about these issues. We are aware of them. We are listening to people on them, and we would do something about them.
Yeah, do you think the fact that the Brexit Party won't define any policies apart from just leaving, do you think that's the key to their success?
I think it is so far, because as long as you refuse to engage with the enemy on the field, they can't destroy your army. Nigel is being very clever there, but once again, it really is a single issue thing, and it's to make sure that people like George Galloway and Anne Widdecombe can exist in the same party, and it's not even a party. Claire Fox, yes, it's not even a party. It's really kind of a protest movement in favour of Brexit. I understand that. I can completely appreciate where he's coming from, why he's doing what he's doing. But at the end of the day, that's really not going to solve any of the other major issues. Maybe it's the thing that we need to solve this one issue, but there are so many other problems, and you'll get the same effect by voting UKIP in regards to Brexit. We want to leave, no deal tomorrow. We would have done it yesterday had we had the choice, and we actually have a manifesto you can hold us to account to. So,
yeah. Well, I think that's about it. That's my spot in the limelight over with.
Well, thank you very much.
So,
hello.
I suppose I've got two questions. I guess the first one is, kind of like traditionally, like kind of left-leaning, I guess. I voted Remain. A lot of my friends did. One thing I kind of realised, pretty soon on was that, a lot of people were seeming to kind of like just forget about, the democratic vote. And that's why, for me, as time started going on, I started really realising that, I'll accept defeat. Everyone else should. The people that, like me, that voted Remain should just kind of accept it, but then also kind of keep a good dialogue going on moving forward. What I've seen to happen, what seems to be happening now with a lot of my friends is they seem to be kind of supporting more authoritarian sort of. They're kind of leaning towards that without them realising it. I don't know whether it's sort of like subconsciously or something.
Yeah.
But it's kind of every time I seem to push, an opinion back towards him, pretty soon on, it'll jump to, your opinion's terrible, it's wrong.
Yeah.
Move on. So when I do kind of put my foot down a little bit more and just kind of back myself up. Obviously, I kind of end up looking like the worst one for speaking my mind. So I guess what I'm trying to say is why do you think people are so quick to jump to the sort of authoritarian standpoint?
I think you're right. I think they don't realise that what they're doing is authoritarian. I mean, it seems that the Remain faction in this country is essentially turning into a revolutionary force against the idea of democracy. Because you voted wrong, your opinions are wrong, and they seem to want to enforce that on other people. And to me, that is authoritarianism. That's the essence of it. I don't know whether they know what they're doing. I would like to believe that they're just kind of trapped in an emotional state where they can't accept that now is the time for them to say, okay, fair enough, we had the vote and I lost. And I think that if they do that, I think they're afraid that they don't have conviction after that? Because like you say, you have these discussions and they push you back into a corner and say, no, I'm standing on a principle here, and I know that this is the right thing to do, and yet they'll make you feel like you're the one who's doing something bad, even though you know they're the ones who are being authoritarian towards you, which in my opinion is immoral, and you're the one standing on the point of principle saying, no, this is what right is. And so I can't speak directly to obviously what's happened, but I've seen that kind of environment a lot, and honestly, it's kind of a cult. I really think it's kind of a cult mentality where you have to sort of denounce the outsider, reaffirm the sanctity of the group and the righteousness of the group, and that can't be challenged. And the person who does challenge that is the bad person, even if you're making a very well-structured moral argument and you have a firm set of principles that underlie this that normally in everyday conversation almost everyone would agree with. Yes, of course, we cast a vote, we must abide by the result. Why would you cast it if you didn't?
I suppose in saying that, the weird thing about it is that obviously me and my group of friends, we all came from the same position. Do you know what I mean? We all kind of had very similar viewpoints on politically. We all, I guess, a bit more left-leaning, not far left together, but it's kind of to the point now where that if I was to say, well, you know what, actually back up things that like people like yourself, you know, Tommy Robinson. As soon as I say that, it's like, whoa, you support a racist. It's like, there's no way of combating it. And well, I think there is, but as you say, they seem to want to push it aside.
There's no quick, snappy sort of comeback. You've got to deconstruct what they're saying. 'Cause I mean, like, racist has just become a thought-terminating cliche in this country. Oh, that's an evil person. It just means Satan, effectively. And 100 years ago, it would have been a religious person saying that's satanic. Now it's, oh, that's racist. It's like, well, how do you define racism? Because a lot of the time, they probably don't even know how they're defining racism to get to the point where they're accusing someone of being a racist. Because this is the problem with the sort of like the way that the radical left are operating now, is they have actually redefined these things. Because I mean, racism to me is subjective. It's an opinion. It's how you feel about someone else of a different race and their entire race of being. That's a terribly negative thing. But they seem to think that there's some form of objective racism, where you can look at, say, the results of a system and say, well, if this result is not equally balanced between black and white people, then this system is racist. And it's like, no, racism is an attitude. It's a feeling. It's what you think. It's not the end conclusion of a process. There are processes that are racist. You could set up like apartheid or something like that. That would obviously be racist. But if the system is not set up to be a racial system, then I don't think that we can sit there and say, oh, it's objectively racist. And I think that's the only way I can think of, from what you've told me, to sort of like try and find a crack in the armor that you can put, you can start leveraging open and say, hey, look, you need to start thinking about the things you're saying. Because, I mean, calling someone a racist is a slur. You don't just...
That lady that walked past.
Absolutely, exactly.
Join in.
Yeah, and she won't have these opinions challenged. She'll shout at us and say, "I don't need to talk to you." But why not? Why would you not need to talk to people? You need. I mean, I might be wrong. If she might make a compelling argument, I might go, "Oh Christ, you know what I was doing was wrong."
Accepting defeating things that you could be wrong on and learning from it. I think a lot of people seem to think that debating is some form of attack when it's not really. It's about resolution.
Yeah,
it's about getting your point across clearly, and then having it contested.
Yeah, it's about it's
not about
isn't it?
I am right and you are wrong, but let's figure out in between. And I feel like a lot more now it's getting pushed to the point where, like, a lot of people are just scared to say things a lot of the times.
Yes. And do we want to live in that kind of society
no.
where people are scared to speak their mind just in case a bunch of ravenous left-wing activists come and ruin you? That's not a free society in my mind. And so, I mean, that's why I'm doing anything that I'm doing. I mean, I don't know where I'll ever be able to get a job again. So basically, vote for me. But,
I guess tying on to the second thing was like a lot more. I'm from the black country. Like, my pretty much my parents' side, both parents and like their families, they both voted to leave.
Yeah.
What would you say to them, because they seem to now be so sort of demoralised from the whole UKIP situation? My parents say, well, we're not voting again. What would you say to those people to try and almost win them back into a political sort of way of thinking instead of just saying, well, it hasn't worked, and they don't think about us. And because I think that's kind of a dangerous position for them to be in next.
Well, yeah, and again, I don't want to just bring it back to sort of like a battlefield example, but I think it's the clearest one. If you refuse to take the field, then the enemy is just going to win. The people who want to keep us in the European Union, if they refuse to vote again, well, they win. We don't leave the European Union, and their vote counted for nothing. It wasn't. They were on the winning side of this referendum. They should have that honoured. That's absolutely important. And if we don't continue to fight these battles, then it'll be the people who really don't want to leave that will win. And so it is incumbent on us, the citizens, the voters, to go out there and tell them twice, if that's what it takes. I really don't want to.
I'll repeat what I hope it's going to turn up on your video twice now, but I'll repeat what I said earlier. I spent a significant part of my life in Australia and was born in Australia, and it has compulsory voting. It is the only country in the OECD with fully funded pensions, because the old people can't shit on the young people because the young people are compelled to the polls. So using grey power to stop a government from getting rid of the triple lock, for example, is not possible in Australia because sufficient numbers of young people go to the polls. Now, I know there's all sorts of stories about young people mostly being Remain and that kind of thing here, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the quality of representativeness. The only way to make democracy acceptable to the maximum number of people is to enhance the quality of representativeness. The best way to do that is to have a very high turnout. A deliberate decision was made back in the early days by the founding fathers in Australia to ensure that it was as representative as possible by having compulsory voting. And the common Australian view, is that refusing to vote in an election of whatever sort is an act of cutting out your own tongue. Because the point of democracy is representativeness. All of these silly arguments, even though the turnout by UK standards in the 2016 referendum was very high, it was still only 72%. So people are going, oh no, it's not a real majority, and so on and so forth. These are just conversations that never happen in Australia. They cannot happen because of that 95% plus turnout. And it's so ingrained in the Australian people that even when a vote is made non-compulsory, as the postal plebiscite for same-sex marriage was in 2017, Australians still produced, and you had to mail something back in to the government. It was complicated and tricky. You had to fill out a form and post it back. The turnout was still 80%. Vote. Vote as if your life depended on it.
If we don't vote, then they will. That's the argument, I think.
I think it seems like a lot of the people that voted to leave and they've seen it not happen, they then think, well, there's no point voting.
Whose slogan is it? Tell them again. Is it yours or Brexit Party's?
It is UKIP's slogan.
It's UKIP's slogan. Okay, tell them again.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the only option we have. Yeah. But you're right. I think there has been a deliberate campaign of demoralisation. Yeah. I think that has been entirely on purpose in order to overturn the result of the referendum. If we let them do it, they will, and I don't think we should.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, Carl.
Hi.
A little bit nervous.
Same here.
We had the local elections, obviously, recently.
Yep.
I went up to do my voting and was faced with three parties.
Yeah.
Faced with three parties. I ain't voting for any of those.
Yeah. No,
they've betrayed us.
Yeah.
All of them. You vote for Lib Dem, you're voting to stay in.
Yeah.
It's totally against my policies. What is it that UKIP are going to do to try to get local MPs in local districts? Because this has changed from Tory now back to Lib Dems. We need to get your party involved in local.
Well, honestly, that's the problem with UKIP is one of the smaller parties. Although it is growing, we've passed 30,000 members now, but it's the membership that stands, and it's also the money as well. It costs money to do this, but UKIP has been on the rise recently. We're despite what they say in Westminster, we're actually doing very well. If you look at like the base of the party, basically we need people to stand in local elections. It's just the sheer number of people. We need bodies in seats. If you're not feeling represented, Have you considered standing yourself?
Oh,
come on. That's
on the spot.
Actually, no. A friend of mine did say that because I actually posted something on Facebook and said, shit, what a waste of a vote.
Yeah.
You go up there, and there was nobody in the polling stations.
Yeah.
I was driving around the polling stations to see how busy they were. There was next to nobody in them. When I went and voted at 6 o'clock, where normally everybody's up there, there was me.
See, that's the problem, isn't it? People are totally disengaged from local politics. I
Yeah.
mean, the turnout for the European elections is also unbelievably low, something like 35%. So it's goes back to the question of compulsory voting, but you are actually tearing out your own tongue if you refuse to vote, and so we have to. But like I said, unfortunately, there's very little that I can do about UKIP not having candidates for local areas.
No.
All I can say is, even if you don't expect to win, it'd probably be best if you just registered yourself for it, just so people can see that there are other like-minded people in that constituency or in that local area.
Yeah.
So even if the Conservatives might get like 5,000 votes and Labour get 2,000, and then UKIP get like 800 or something. At least that's somewhere that people can put their vote to say, look, I disagree. I have opposition to the current order, and so like I said, even if you're not prepared to win, you likely won't. If you're just standing to say, I'm standing because I feel I must, it would be better to have you there than not. And I would implore people to think about, just consider doing it for yourself. I don't think it's a huge thing to have to do. I think it's just you put your name in and then you go home. But that's what
I must admit, I've lost quite a few friends.
Yeah.
Over my recent last 2 years of my political stance on it. I've watched a stack of your videos, same as Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
And various other intellectual people who actually use the definitions of the words we're using in the English language, other than racist means anything from a religion to a sect of people. It's not using the true definition. I actually looked into the racism. It took me 4 separate links before religion was actually mentioned in ties with racism. But my second question is, notice Tommy had a video up this morning saying he had a meeting with the local police. And he's got another OSMA warning.
Right, yeah.
They've told him to sign a waiver to release them from protecting a member of the MEP, an MEP.
Yeah.
I would like to know your...
I had no idea that the police...
I haven't seen this.
I haven't seen this.
Yeah, it was released on YouTube this morning.
Really?
Notice came through because obviously I'm signed up with Tommy, as well as I am with you. You've buggered me up a little bit because you're going for the MEP. He's also going for the MEP.
Well, it's different areas.
Different region, though.
I know it is, but...
So, like, you can't vote for him down here, but you can vote for me, so...
Oh, well, you got my vote already.
Thank you.
That's without doubt. UKIP all the way. They're the only honest party that I've actually seen.
Yeah, totally agree.
The only problem is UKIP, to me, are, at the moment, just a European party. They're not actually a British governing party, and that's what we need. We need you lot. Balls to the EU.
Yeah, I know. I don't want to be going there either, you know what I mean?
That bloke you spoke to, the elderly gentleman in Gibraltar that said, oh, no, don't, I'm not voting for you.
Yeah.
And he was adamant that, no, I voted leave, I'm not going to vote again.
Yeah.
I think I've gone right off the trail there.
Well, no. I mean, you're exactly right. We just leave the field open to the people who will vote, and they're people who we generally won't agree with.
No.
And we would be able to put up a good resistance too if we were to be the ones there. But I agree with you. We need local and national governmental representation. No question of it. The problem is just UKIP's size at the moment, but like I said, every day we're growing. Every day people are realising that, hang on, there is actually something good about this country that we can be proud of, that we don't have to be ashamed about. There is a problem with corruption of our institutions. There is a problem with free speech, and there is obviously a massive problem with Brexit. So I think that if you want any of these issues covered, then UKIP is the only party that's going to actually take a consistent and reliable position on this.
Yeah.
So I think that, it looks dark now, but, in 5 years, you'll see where we are.
There's a stack of concern with how Europe are being run.
Yeah.
I saw a while ago, it was Farage.
Yeah.
That publicised that Europe MEPs or in Brussels,
yeah,
they've actually got a town.
Oh yeah.
A location where only MEPs are allowed to go.
yeah. It's very privileged over there.
Now, looking at communities, you've got that community there, and then you look at the Saudi and the Far East.
Yeah.
The troubles they've got there, but the privileged have got their little
the
Abu
European,
Dhabis and Dubais.
Yeah, and the European Union is no different in that regard. They're very much in favour of privilege. Like when I went there, right, I went to the Strasbourg Parliament. The MEPs have their own little bar in which they can smoke inside the building. Now, you can imagine no one else is allowed to smoke inside this building, but the MEPs can, and that's the way the European Union works. It's not about equality, it's not about fairness, it is about sort of, it's honestly, I think that the main driving thing for them is kind of glory. I think they want, aggrandization, the sort of Napoleonic way of looking at the world, and they really seem to come across like that, as if we are this, we are that, we are the other, we deserve all of these things, and I really don't like that. I really don't like the way of looking at that way of looking at the world.
That is classic. Do as I say, not do as I do. That is extraordinary. And especially on public health, where they are just the worst lot of nanny-stating bureaucrats.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness! And all of you should read the best critic of the nanny state is Christopher Snowdon at the IEA. You should all read Christopher Snowdon. He's very funny. But my God,
it's unreal.
Do as I say, don't do as I do.
You're not allowed to smoke indoors, but we are allowed to smoke indoors. Sorry plebs. You have to understand we know better than you, and that's honestly their attitude towards everything.
The point I'm actually getting to is with the illegal immigration, as well as legal. But with the illegal immigration that we've got coming through Europe, and with a little town, a little bit tinfoily, but do you think that there's a possibility that they are actually trying to make the same sort of system as they've got in the Far East, and actually turn the rest of Britain, the rest of Europe, into slums, into little war areas where they're going to have all our fractions? Because we're already seeing it in France, Spain, Italy. We're seeing it in Germany, where there's rebellions, groups of people now being called all far right. Anybody protesting against who's running us is far right.
I'm reasonably sure that far right is just a synonym for working class. I'm reasonably sure of it.
It's also to be derogatory to anybody that doesn't think their own way.
Yes.
I was actually told by a friend who's a trans, told that I was a racist and to own it.
Right, well,
and to be proud of it. And I said, well, actually, no.
Yeah.
I'm very proud of my heritage. Similar to your own, my great-grandparents, my great-grandfather was black. We don't know where he was from. We traced it all the way back to the Amstrad.
Oh, yeah.
And he jumped off ship off the Amstrad. Can't find any records past that. So I'm exceptionally proud of my heritage, especially from that side of my family. I'm immensely proud of the struggles, everything that they went through. For somebody to tell me to own racism is...
Was it a bourgeois socialist?
He's actually a fascist, and anti whatever the hell he is. I mean, he's old school. But he's a bloody good mate. Struggled with his life all the way through with trans and all that. And I got no issues with it. But when he said to me, he has to own trans. Well, that's his bloody choice. That's his general makeup. But for somebody to tell me that's what I am, ain't right.
As if it, again, as if racism is something objective that they can point to and not a subjective opinion
Exactly.
that you hold.
Yes.
And you don't hold that opinion.
No.
So why are they trying to pin that to you? What good does it do?
Yeah.
What it doesn't advance dialogue.
I couldn't understand when he said, own it, be proud of it, say all right and sod it. I am a racist.
Yeah,
but I'm not a racist.
Exactly.
Which bit of yourself do you hate while you're at it?
Yeah. I mean, we all have. Every single person in this world has a racist thought at one point or another. They will, in the back of their mind, they say it to themselves. Fucking wanker.
And if they're like Liam Neeson, he'll say it publicly, and then he'll get himself in all manner of trouble, even though that's not an opinion he holds anymore.
No, no. It was a brief prelude of his life and the emotions that he was going through, and he was open and honest enough to say it. But then you have all these, wankers, slagging him down for it.
Yeah.
He was only saying what everybody else is too bloody scared to say. That they've got those opinions.
Yeah.
But that does not make me a racist.
Yeah.
I do not go out in my personal way. I do not look at people and go, "Oh, he's that or he's that." I don't put them in a society.
Of course.
There's no judgment.
Even then, if you can't even entertain a thought, then how do you know you don't agree with it?
No.
You have to be able to say, even if it was a spontaneous thought you've had, you can't say, right, okay, well now I can't talk about that or think about that because, why would I not be able to analyze the things that are in my head? I mean, like, you know that you don't want to be a bigot. You know that racism is bad.
Yeah.
But if you don't know why you're having a particular kind of thought, how do you know that you're not? You have to be able to analyze it and actually say, well, no, I know where that came from, and that's not the road I want to go down. So you have to be able to be honest with yourself about these things. And it's this kind of pathological, nothing should ever touch me, so I remain pure. That's I think that's a real problem, and it really has to stop.
Yeah.
We have to stop attacking people over the thoughts they have.
Exactly, and that was my point with a little bit, but with like Tommy.
Yeah.
He's consistently being called a racist. And
I don't think he is.
and
No.
He's not. I've looked through shed loads of his stuff. I mean, I don't see it, and I don't see you it, and I don't see 90% of the people that are being called it actually being.
Yep.
But now we've got these censorships, like it is with Tommy, like they've done with what's his face, Milo and
Milo, Paul Joseph Watson,
and all of those.
Laura Loomer,
yeah, and they're even threatening Tim.
Oh yeah, Tim Pool,
Yeah. Again, now, this type of censorship from the far left is becoming ridiculous, and it's getting to a point where you fear talking to people. I actually said to somebody that my nan was a half caste, and they interrupted me straight away and went, "Oh no, that's mixed race."
Oh, sorry.
I was like,
you know what I was trying to say?
Yeah.
I wasn't trying to be offensive.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And it was also talking about my own family.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So, but anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
No, thank
Cheers.
you.
Anytime, man. Right. Oh, sorry, yeah.
Hello. Back again.
That's all right.
There is one thing that's like niggling at me.
Yeah.
It's just like I've seen a lot of people who have mental health and a lot of people who have invisible disabilities, such as me. Like, yeah, I may carry a crutch, but a lot of people would say to me around, you don't need it, you can walk perfectly fine.
Yeah.
But what they don't understand is when they label you in that category, they just undermine the suffering that you're actually going through.
Yes.
And I've found that no matter how many times you tell a person this is what the issue is, they will completely ignore it until they see it for themselves.
Yeah.
And with the disability, area as it is, a lot of the assessors themselves, they ignore your symptoms. Like, I had an assessment recently with PIP, and it was a physical assessment. I showed them that I cannot get off the floor without my back and my knees locking. And when I got the assessment back, it just went and said, my physical movement is fine. And I basically have gone and got the letter from my doctor who says I have very complex physical and mental health needs. You know, I own that. That's what I own.
Yeah.
But what other people see on the outside is just someone who's able to do these things, but they genuinely can't. Like, I can't actually pick up a plate that's really heavy.
Right.
If it's got food on it, not really going to happen. But what's niggling at me is that the disability section in itself seems to be getting so underfunded, or they seem to be getting even worse in the way that they deal with people because of the fact that they're being told by other people who are higher up or, you know, have been privatized that they have to lay people off for a certain amount so that people can actually get disability, which I don't really agree with, because there are people out there who are suffering but are forced to work for no reason. And that can become quite a problem if you are suffering, because that means you'll be taking a lot of sick days and you'll be taking a lot of time off, which can be troublesome for the actual workplace. And then it's just a domino effect of causing people to do one thing, but they're actually really sick and they can't do it. And they've shown you that they're really sick and they've shown you the evidence. But no matter how much evidence you actually gather, even through the NHS, it becomes a very difficult battle to actually gain the benefits that you need in order to function in normal society. What would you think on that?
It's a deliberate policy. I mean, this is a deliberate policy. This is one area, I mean, I don't know whether you were here at the beginning of this where we were talking about benefit sanctions and the link between benefit sanctions of whatever sort, not necessarily with disability, all kinds of benefits, and food bank use. It's been well documented because it tends to happen region by region. This is one area where Labor's criticism is a legitimate one. It's been going on for a number of years. Its earliest form started under the Blair government, but it was made much worse by the Conservatives, and I have to just own and acknowledge this even though I'm a Conservative. It's based on the idea that if you have relatively generous benefits payments, people will malinger. There's a problem in economics known as moral hazard, which is literally amounts to if there is a bad thing in the world and you pay for that bad thing, you will get more of it. Yeah. And in this case, that bad thing is disability. That's the economic argument behind this. It's very simple. It's a very simple principle, but the problem.
But a disability isn't something that
anyone can control.
But the thing is, individuals can't control. But there has been a history, and this was the rationale behind the policy. I'm not saying I endorse it. There has been a history of something known as malingering, where people pretend to be sick because they prefer not to work, and that's the moral hazard that economists talk about. However, the effect the policy as it exists now uses this incredibly blunt instrument, benefit sanctions, to try and stop what they perceive to be this problem. And I mean, you see those jokes like disabled people in comas to be used as draft excluders, you know, because they failed their assessment. That was on the Daily Mash, I think. It's just it doesn't work. The system is not working. It is failing. I have been hearing this story for so many years now about all of the various forms of disability payments and the way disability is managed and funded and assessed in this country is just it's as big a mess as Brexit, except it's under the radar because Brexit
no
is just
to talk about it.
all of the political oxygen in the country, basically.
Yeah. But it's actually hurting people, you know.
I
mean, I don't want to have to say Tory austerity cuts like Jeremy Corbyn, but like you say, it's one of those few things that the stop clock is right twice a day, and this is one of those.
And this is one where
things.
he is,
It's like I genuinely have an invisible disability. A lot of people would say, like, for example, I was on the bus like a few weeks back, and I was sitting in the disabled seat. And this is when I didn't have my crutch to help me support my weight and stop my dizziness. But the person just said to me, like, why are you sitting there? You are able-bodied. You don't have to, like, take up a seat from an elderly person. And I just said back to them, disability doesn't have to have physical, it's not always a physical manifestation. It's sometimes you cannot help it. It is there. It is in your brain. Your body is on fire, but no one else can see that.
They're asking you to be performative, aren't they?
Yeah.
You know, perform your disability for me.
Exactly.
And it's like,
and it's
you
just
don't
like,
have
I don't
to do
feel like
that.
that's actually necessary to do that. Like if you're disabled and you have an invisible disability, you shouldn't have to prove yourself.
Yeah.
And then they'll like, well, I want to see your disability card. Not everyone in this country
has a blue badge.
Yes. You cannot have, for every disability, a different type of badge because that's not going to work. No one's going to like understand or continue to understand where that is. Yeah. And I just said to them, like, not every disability has to have a badge because it depends on the severity of it. Yes, I'm on a severe end of scale with mental and physical. And I am quite a complex case, which means that it can cause a lot of issues for doctors to diagnose and a lot of issues for people to actually see that you're struggling. But the fact that they are becoming more and more strict on the fact that they're trying to basically cut out all of the people that are just faking it, but it's also affecting, in domino effect, it's affecting the people who are actually disabled, and therefore they're sitting there wiggling their thumbs during the day, worrying if their payments are going to get taken off them because they can't work in general. I can't work in general. Like I've tried. Trust me, I have tried. But because of the way that my physical disability is, I will get ill really quickly, and I'll end up taking a lot of sick days, and that's not appropriate. And what I'm trying to get at is that the way that things are, if it doesn't change, eventually there's going to be a whole breakdown in the system, and it will end up going up in flames, like my poster looks like. It genuinely, in expression of that, what Parliament is doing is lighting a fire that they won't be able to put out. And until they acknowledge that, they're going to continue adding gasoline to that fire, and it's going to become a very sticky situation. They are either going to have to do one thing or the other thing, and it just depends where it's going to go, because it could leave a lot of people out of pocket, or in general, just in poverty.
People, that's the thing. It could actually hurt a lot of people. And I mean, I think we've got enough evidence to suggest that it is already.
It's like my mum, she's disabled. Like, genetically, this is what's happened. But she literally had to fight for 7 years to get acknowledgement that she was disabled. It has taken me 6 years for me to get acknowledgement that I'm disabled. And I don't think people should have to go constantly through that process of being asked questions that they've already answered before, but people just haven't written the answers down, or they actually lie on tests. For example, for my PIP examination, like, they genuinely lied. And that has now caused me to lose out on a lot of, in a sense, benefits, because of the fact that I can't get anywhere without people being with me, hence my two good friends over there. Like, they look after me. They're the ones who are my carers at this point in time until I move and go and live with my mum and be with my dad. But it's just, a lot of people wouldn't understand that the way universal credit runs is they barely pay the bare minimum. So, like, politicians, they get like a food like thing of £149, whereas we are barely getting 50, maybe even less than that, or even 70, just about that. And that's not enough to cover a week's worth of food or a month's worth. If you have children, that's going to have a knock-on effect with them, and it's going to become a situation where the richer are going to get richer, and the poor people are just going to slowly fade into dying of starvation or anything. Just like, if they privatise the NHS, we're all screwed. Like, people who are disabled are going to be screwed, because we're not going to be able to afford to pay those bills. We're not going to be able to afford to actually function in society.
I thank you.
Awesome.
Cheers.
Hi. Hi. I'm an immigrant, and I'm not going to talk about Brexit. I have 3 questions, and I'm sorry if my questions don't reflect your personal opinion, but it kind of will reflect the party's, I'd say, advertised opinion. I'm 29. I came to the UK 10 years ago for education. So I paid the international fee for education. I'm not eligible for public funds, and after 10 years, I'm still not a citizen. I've been working immediately after graduating in a shortage job that the UK doesn't have enough people to do. I pay tax. I'm trying to be a good person. So I have 3 questions for you. The first, why do you think somebody like me can be problematic for the country? I'm an immigrant.
Okay, well,
second,
let me address these one at a time. You aren't problematic for the country, obviously. I mean, that's
can I finish the 3 questions and then
okay.
you
Well,
finish
I'll probably forget them. That's the problem. So.
Okay, try to remember.
Yeah,
Bear
I
with
will.
me.
I've got a terrible memory.
The very short questions. Yeah. The second question is, I understand that maybe you're making, when you talk about immigrants, and it's a very big umbrella, bear in mind about 90% of the immigrants I know are similar to my circumstances. Why do you ignore, not you personally, the numbers that indicate that most immigrants are just like me, and generalize that statement about immigrants? Third question and final question. When we talk about immigrants who are in need, immigrants who are fleeing persecution, immigrants who are coming here with the hope of a good life, although in my case, I had a good life. I just wanted a better life as a woman, a better life as a human being in a more developed country. Why do we even more persecute people who are in need? Not in legislation-wise, but when talking about them, when portraying to them, to the majority of people who never seen an immigrant before. Why do we not stick to the British values I came to understand, I came to learn in my time in the UK, to be nice, not to open the doors, you know? I respect a country's need to protect themselves, to protect their wealth, to protect their culture. But why do we not use the British values that I learned in Britain and be kind to these people, at least by not portraying them that way?
I think we should. I completely agree with you that we should be kind to people. I mean, like, I try and make this point over and over again. It is not. Sorry, do you want? I think it's that. Yeah, the problem is not the individual immigrant. That's the thing. It's not the individual like yourself who comes over and is hardworking and conscientious and dutiful and does what you're supposed to do. And you do exactly the right kind of thing. You obviously like this country. You know, you feel free to turn it on and correct me if I'm wrong, of course. But you obviously like this country. You think it's a good idea. You think it's a good place.
This country, and that's why the reason why I came here.
Let me just finish my point. The problem is not the individual immigrant. You know, the problem is not a person who comes here looking for a better life. Of course, that's fine. The problem is the number of people that we allow to come here to look for a better life. And it's like the lady was saying about the disability problems and all of the austerity cuts and things like that. The problem, I don't think it is. But if you want to sit around and talk to us, we're happy to hear your opinion on it. You know, oh, that's weird, isn't it? It's weird how they're always busy. But yeah, no.
The other lady off.
Yes, I'm sorry about that. So yeah, the problem isn't the individual immigrant. The problem is just the number that come in every year. It's a net migration of 300,000 per year.
But don't you think the narrative, the way that you're addressing this problem, if to say you have 10 immigrants, yeah, and you saying we don't need 10 immigrants, we need 5 immigrants, and you start talking about these 5 immigrants, do you not think that you're making life worse for these human beings? Do you not think that these aren't numbers? They are people. Do you not think that when you're walking around, if you make just one person try to hide their identity, try to blend because they're scared about their safety or they're scared about being seen as a burden while they're not, or
I
simply...
don't agree you're a burden or anything like that. And that's
I
not
don't
how,
think you do. I don't think
you
you
listen
do.
to my position on it then.
Can I
because
just...
I'm descended from immigrants myself.
Can I
I'm
just
not-
clarify?
I'm not.
Can I just clarify a point?
Okay.
I do not think that you think I'm a burden, but do you not agree with me that the narrative that when I'm sorry for saying that, but well, I'm not sorry for saying that because this is my opinion.
Sure.
I'm trying to be polite. Yeah, there's something I reinforce. Being here reinforced me
you're
in
doing
that.
great, yeah.
Do you not think that UKIP, when we say UKIP, yeah, the first thing that comes to my mind, oh, the racist bunch, right? Let's be.
If that's
you know?
the papers you read,
Well, I'm dyslexic. I don't read papers.
the narrative you follow then.
I seriously don't.
Yeah.
But I know many people, and you know what? If I don't believe in dialogue, if I don't believe that this is the right thing to do, I wouldn't have been here talking to you. I respect that you're sitting here open for different people to talk to you. But what I'm trying to tell you, that sometimes because you don't see these people in front of you, sometimes because you're just dealing with maybe statistics or numbers, you do not realize how hard it is for people who left a country to make a better life in a different country to hear that they could be a burden.
I don't think that you're representing my opinion, and you keep cutting me off. I'd love to be able to actually respond now, because I am the descendant of immigrants. Do you understand? My grandfather came to this country in much the same way you did. In fact, he came over because of the war effort back in the 40s. So it's, I'm not unsympathetic to this regard, but you have to understand that there is another side to the argument, and that is sort of like 5,000 people in Luton wearing thobes and burqas chanting "Death to the West, to hell with free speech." Like these are, hey, I'm not talking to you, right? These are a real consequence of mass immigration, and it's not the individual themselves. It's because of the raw number of people that have come, and they've not been encouraged to integrate, and they've been encouraged to stay separate. It's not like the average immigrant, and I'm sorry about the narrative, whatever narrative you have in your head around this, but this isn't the narrative that I have around this. I agree with you. And after 10 years, it's a disgrace that you haven't been made a citizen. Like,
it doesn't matter.
Well, no, I can't hear you unless you're using. Sorry, I can't hear you.
It doesn't matter. It's not. Sorry, could you? It doesn't matter how long it has been. Since day one, I love this country. I wanted to make a life in this country. Yeah. What is the line? What is the threshold? You say, you know what? After that line, I'm gonna treat you like you belong here.
Well, I don't treat you any differently.
No, I'm not.
But this is the thing. You seem to be reacting to a narrative that I'm not creating.
I respect that, and that's why the first thing I said when I stood here, that this might not be your personal opinion, but at least this is what most people, and maybe you agree or disagree with that, feel when they hear the word UKIP. It's certainly an idea that immigrants have. It's certainly few things that people who claim or claim to represent your party sometimes reflect to the public.
Sure.
So again, I am not attacking you personally. Yeah. I am dealing with you as a face of the party. You sitting behind the banner.
That's fair. That's completely fair. But all I can do is explain my position, what I think on it. So I can't.
Can I ask
speak
you?
To this
can
narrative.
I ask you?
Well, hang on. And I think that we are what we repeatedly do. The things that we are, we demonstrate through our virtue rather than just believing something someone else has said somewhere else. And I don't agree with immigrants being bad people or anything like that. It's never something I've ever said. And it's just about the numbers that are coming in. Like I said, I am the descendant of immigrants. I'm all for immigration when it's controlled and it's sensible, and it's not people who have a general kind of loathing of the country that they're going to. I think that's wrong. I think it's wrong to come to a country and say, actually, this country's a bad thing. doing. You know, you're obviously not in that camp, obviously. You know, and like you say, you know, you were.
In many circumstances, I've been grouped under that group, regardless how I feel.
Hang on, man. Hang on. Come on.
Thank you, sir. But could you?
Yeah, I know. We can have a conversation about that shortly afterwards. Do you mind if I carry on having the dialogue? Thank you. Sorry, can you remind me what you said before he interrupted? Well, I'm sorry that you get grouped in with people who hate this country. I'm sorry that happens, but I don't think I'm the one doing it, and I don't know who you are thinking of who does that. You know, and I think honestly, most of this. I can't
think about one particular person who used to be the face of your party.
What, you think Nigel Farage does that? Do you? I mean, that's fine.
Look, I am not interested in pointing fingers. I'm not interested in accusing people. I'm not
he's
interested.
In a different party.
I'm not interested in accusing people for having the wrong ideas. I think what you're doing here by talking to different people is great. And I think if you think some people in your party are broadcasting the wrong idea, I think. I am not in a position to advise, but I would advise your party to try to sort of make it clear what they stand for, because many people will not go and try to ask people personally. They will just look at whoever representing you, whoever tweets on your Twitter accounts, whoever is on TV speaking, and I am trying to just believe that many people who came out with some less than kind things to say are not representative in our individual cases. But if you're not aware, many people think this is the party you represent. Thank you very much for doing that, and I'm sorry if it was too long or if I interrupted you.
Well, that's fine. And I hang on a second. I really appreciate the fact that you came down to speak, even though you're talking to Johnny now. I really appreciate the fact that you came down to speak, and I really think that your opinion does need to be represented as well. Like I said, this is why I'm providing this kind of platform. You know, I want everyone to have their. Thank you, and I want everyone to have these opinions formed. But this is really the problem when you have a sort of, I guess, what I would describe as an opposition media. They make things up. They say things that are not representative.
Maybe it's not. I mean. Most of what I've said, it was people speaking directly, people who represent UKIP speaking directly to the media. It wasn't the media saying that person said that. All I'm saying is, if this is, I would like to think that a party has a certain ideology, has a certain set of values that they stand for, and if you think that doesn't represent you, I would appreciate if your party makes it clearer.
Well, I think I am trying to make it clear. I want to make sure that people understand that UKIP, as far as I can tell, and I think a lot of the problem is that UKIP is honestly made up of a lot of working class people who don't necessarily articulate themselves in the most accurate way that they can. But I really do think that UKIP does represent a kind of British liberal value, the sort of value towards fairness and tolerance and acceptance. But it has to be based on the idea that this is a good country with good people in it. And unfortunately, if you look at the Labour, I agree. But if you look at like the Labour Party, they don't agree. You know, they don't think this is a good country. They think a lot of the people in this country are bad people. And that is a premise that I just cannot get on board with and start from that point onwards. You know, and it when people come here to make this country a better place, that's great. But when people come here and just seem to kind of hate the country, I can't accept that, you know. And I'm not saying, obviously you're not one of those people, you know. Like the slogan we use is service guarantees citizenship, and it sounds like you've earned your citizenship to me, you know. I would never consider you not British.
I highly recommend you reading through the immigration policies, because before making comments about the immigration system in the country, and by no means I'm saying that this immigration system is wrong or has to be changed. All I want is for people, when they make statements, they make informed statements that are based on realistic cases rather than based on how people feel.
But again, I haven't made any statements to the contrary to that. I agree with you. I think that's a great point.
Again, I'm not accusing you. I'm speaking on stuff that I've seen in the media from your party.
Okay, well, thank you for your input. I really appreciate it. So, have we got any of the hardcore applause over here that would like to talk? Because I'd love to hear from some of you chaps.
Well, I've listened to all the other speakers, right, and we've got a health service that's kind of like overloaded, and it seems to be majority of sort of like people from different parts of the world that do all the menial jobs and surgeons and other jobs. So everybody's got a purpose in this country. I mean, the Southwest to me is a bit of a backwater anyway. I mean, this town is like, it's like something out of the dark ages. My family, right, my children are mixed race kids, and the N-word, I mean, is still like quite openly used in pubs, clubs and the bus station, which is where I've worked for 20 years. I've listened to people just talking rubbish all the time. And if that is the attitude of people of this part of the world, then, you know, this country hopefully will wake up soon to the fact that we can all work together. This is a good country to live in. We do look after people. And I listened to another speaker that's talking about mental health and stuff like that, and also physical disabilities. But unfortunately, we can't, the health service cannot support everybody indefinitely. People will have to start putting money into the system to get something out, because reality says to me every day there's like a new mental illness, there's a new problem. I mean, for me personally, I struggle, right, but I have to get my ass out of bed every morning and go to work, and I do get through the day with help of my friends, okay, but it doesn't mean that I'm actually less than anybody else. Never really received any help. England, I mean, what is it becoming? It's someone mentioned culture. Do we have a culture in this country anymore? No, it's multicultural. It's a multicultural country. I mean, if you're talking about English culture, I mean, you've only got to go down to sort of Exmoor and places like that to see the best of English culture. I mean, we're still hunting foxes. I mean, is anybody here that sort of like doesn't like foxes? To me, they're a pest, right? And I love them as well. I've got dogs and cats and stuff. But if we live in the real world, what is UKIP actually going to do for England, my country?
Well, exactly what we say we're going to do. We're going to well, I mean, any particular like avenue you want me to go down with this?
Well, I just want I want everybody to realise that they're actually valued. I mean, there was that lady sort of like talking about
I completely agree with you, right? And I really think that this is the sort of thing we need to do, and I think it begins from a position that isn't self-flagellating.
Yeah.
A position that doesn't say that England itself is a bad thing. It doesn't, that the people in it are bad people and they will treat other people badly. Like, I don't know what statements she was speaking to, and she wouldn't specify, so I don't exactly know what to address there. But that's not my opinion. Like I said, I'm the descendant of immigrants. I think they came here because they thought this place was a good place too.
It is a good country, but unfortunately, it's a very small country.
Yes.
And we really can be selective.
Yes, well, we have to be.
We need to be selective to get people that can actually put something into our system.
Well, yeah, I mean,
because if people are coming from bad regimes, why not stand up and fight their own bad regime? Why not sort your own house out before you come to someone else's?
Well, I completely agree. You know, it's incumbent on you to fix your
Can you
country.
bring the microphone up to your face?
Yeah, sure, but I was a bit scared of what I was saying.
Yeah, no worries. But this is the problem with mass immigration and having social services and welfare services. It's reality. Like you say, it's not about good or bad. It's about what is and what isn't. And if you have 300,000 people coming in a year who are then going to start using services that they haven't previously contributed to, you're putting a burden on the rest of the people in the country who have to pay for their use of those services because they're free at the point of service.
What about people that visit us for a short length of time to have their children because they know we've got a really good health service and we look after children and we've got
also
a really
benefit
good backup.
tourism.
Yeah, benefit tourists.
Well, I disagree with the idea of benefit tourism. I don't think that should be done.
But as soon as it hits the headlines, it's always poor mummy, poor baby. And then we have to kind of like cough up. I mean, to me, this country is lacking backbone. We need to have some kind of a moral standpoint, but also a moral backbone as well, where we can actually stand by what we say. Because I've listened to the government over the last few years, and it's just like wishy-washy stuff. It's just like table tennis with facts and figures. Let's just move forward.
Yeah, and the sad reality is we can't just be a charity for the rest of the world.
But this is what we're becoming.
Yeah, I know. That's
because
sorry. No,
I'll do it. Yeah, sorry.
Like this is the sad reality of the case. Is the world is actually a really terrible place. Like, and Britain is a tiny corner of it that isn't terrible, and we can't just expect to allow everyone in the country or everyone in the world to come into our country and benefit exactly in the way that the rest of us benefit. That's just not possible. The systems we support will fall apart. We can't afford that. And so we have to be sensible about what we do and how we manage the country if we want to pass down anything to our children that is of any value of itself. And that means restricting mass immigration. This isn't about the individual immigrant. This is about where they come from. It's not even about the culture. It's just about the numbers. You know, we can still have immigration from various places. It's just got to be reduced. That's my opinion.
I mean, we've got quite a large East European community in this part of the world, and they're great, absolutely fantastic. And I've worked with lots of good people at the bus station, made their homes here and everything else because people work. Yeah. But we just cannot support everybody.
Yeah.
And also, this is the West is like the biggest arms factory, manufacturer, it probably concentration of in the world. So we supply sort of weapons for different regimes. Obviously,
Russia does their part too.
Sorry?
Russia does their part
Russia
too.
and America have always played their part in sort of like, let's fight a war on someone else's territory, hang about, someone's put something into the Twin Towers. Well, maybe that took the war home to them and said something. So I actually look and try to understand why terrorists do stuff. I mean, suffragettes, I mean, they were terrorists, but they actually got women votes. I wish younger people would actually vote and use their votes. I mean, everybody has their means, but the thing is, we don't really need to go back to the Stone Age and start burning the houses down to try and make a point. We've already done that. There is a new way, but we should sort of like, the talk has got to stop. We just got to stand by what we believe in and move forward.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right.
Pointing towards you. Oh, yeah.
Can I, before we start, can I ask you who you voted for in the last election?
General election or locals?
General.
General, I voted for Labour.
Okay. And did you vote Remain or Leave?
I voted Remain as well.
Okay. So I'm the complete opposite. So how do you find yourself here? What would you like to talk about?
I mean, I've been stood over there for quite some time, and I've heard some very valid...
So you've got to hold it a bit closer. Well, why don't you come and tell me why I should fuck off?
I'm not sure who he's telling to fuck off. He might be telling this lad to
Good point.
fuck
Right,
off
I don't want you to fuck off either.
Don't you fuck off.
Sorry,
ignore him.
Yeah, I assumed he was talking to me. Sorry.
Okay, so I've stood here and I've listened to what people have to say,
Mhm.
and I've heard some very, very valid political points. I've also heard a lot of vitriol, and I've heard a lot of misappropriation. I've heard a lot of talk about immigration being one of the big causes of the fundamental social issues that we see everywhere across society. I've seen a lot of that, okay? And I think that
well,
is
hang
a
on,
terrible... No, if you let me finish...
Let's calm it down a second, because
I'm
I don't
absolutely
agree
calm,
I
I'm
don't agree
passionate,
that
and I'm trying to extend my point onto you.
But
So
I'm,
if
I'm
you
worried
would do
about
me
the
the
hyperbole you're
courtesy-
using. I mean,
Okay.
vitriol, is that how you describe it? We're
Yes,
just
I would.
talking.
I would.
Really?
Yeah,
I don't
would.
consider this to be a vitriolic conversation that we've had.
Okay, well, I disagree.
Okay.
So we're going to have to
We
move
can
back
agree to
onto what I was
disagree.
saying before you interrupted. So as I was saying, I think there's been a massive, massive misappropriation here of all the issues that we see in society being to do with immigration. It's bizarre. It's wrong. The real issue is with the corporate elites. It's with corporate tax avoidance. When we're talking about providing for the needy in society, they are the ones that are pillaging this country. It is not immigrants. It is not people coming here for a better life. It is those people at the top that are taking from the many and the us.
Okay,
and it is
Mr.
appalling that we're here and
Right.
we're in this situation.
Okay,
it
well,
really is.
is there any line at all in your philosophy that prevents further immigration at any point?
So what you're saying is, if
Is there any limit?
if immigration went on at an exponential rate, would there be a point? Well, yes, we'd run out of space in the country, wouldn't
Well, okay,
we?
and that-
But
and
is
it's
that a
literally-
likely
that's
scenario?
literally the point, is it?
that a likely scenario? No.
Well,
You're
no, hang on,
No,
hang
listen
on,
to me,
hang on,
because
no.
you're reframing the conversation
Yes.
away from what I've said.
Yes.
And what I've asked you to address
deliberately.
is whether. Yeah, why? So you're deliberately avoiding my question?
No, I'm deliberately
yes, you
trying
are.
to explain
yes,
to you
are.
your question is
I
only
don't need
half
my
of the
question
story.
explaining to me because I've asked you it.
Yeah, but I don't
So
think
if
you
could give
understand
me a
your own
response,
question.
that would be
I
far
don't think you
better.
understand your own
That
question.
would be far.
right?
No, I think
don't
you are
think you
fundamentally
understand your own
avoiding my
question,
question.
sir.
You're
Right?
meandering, and you're no
I
better
can
than the
tell you
parties that you say you oppose.
We're a lot
you
better
are
than
no
Labour,
better.
I tell you that.
You are
But-
no better. You are
Okay, hang on.
meandering, and you're
How
avoiding
about
my
you let me
question.
speak?
What is
I'll-
your policy
okay.
on corporate tax avoidance, and where does it fit in line with the issues that we see in society comparative to immigration?
Well,
now,
my
please
personal-
answer that directly.
See, now you've tried to link two issues together here. Immigration and corporate tax policy are not the same.
Would
right?
you like me to repeat
Would
my
you like me
question
to
because
finish my
clearly you
statement?
don't understand
Would you
it?
like me to finish my statement? Right? Now,
Yeah.
I agree with you completely, 100%, that corporate tax avoidance is a massive issue across the West, not just in this country, the West, right? The problem that we have is all of these loopholes. Now, I'm an entrepreneur. sorry, yeah, you're getting feedback on that, right? I'm an entrepreneur. Like, I'm not a big businessman. I'm not involved with corporations. I'm a small guy. I just work for myself and I earn my own money, right? I don't have offshore tax haven accounts and all this sort of nonsense. This is obviously done by corporate lobbyists who have had control over the government and have had influence to put these into place. It is not people like us that have put this into place, right? And this is a way of taking advantage of the people of this country, right? I completely agree with you on that. There's no questions asked. You're absolutely right. Corporations should pay their fair share, right? But by the same token, I don't think corporations are evil. I don't think we need to smash the state. I don't think we need to appropriate all the property and wherever the radical lefties and Labour go. This is also nonsense. But by the same token, I don't think that the limit to mass immigration to this country should be literally when we're wall to wall full, like Mega City 1. So that's a ridiculous position that you've put yourself in.
So again, you've spoken rather eloquently about the issues with corporate tax avoidance, but you haven't answered my question about why immigration is a greater threat to this country than the billions that are hemorrhaged that could be used for all the services that everybody here has discussed.
I didn't say that it was.
Why has that?
I didn't say that it was.
Well, I'm asking why your
Like
policy
I said,
reflects that then. You support a party whose policy reflects immigration being the big problem in this country.
It is a big
Quite
problem
frankly,
in this country.
it's not the biggest problem in this country.
I didn't say it was the biggest.
Well, then why do you represent a party whose policy represents that?
Because we're not just a
That's
a
cognitive
hive
dissonance
mind like
there,
the
isn't it?
Labour Party.
It's absolutely
there
ridiculous.
are people within this party with whom I disagree, and that's okay. We're a party of free speech. We're a party of free ideas. We are not just the kind of hive mind of the Labour Party where you're like, oh, you have to believe every single thing.
The hive mind?
Yeah,
Why?
absolutely.
I'm stood here as an individual and telling you my opinion, and you're telling me I'm part of a hive mind.
You seem to be, yeah. You're parroting the
How?
same nonsense NPC talking points. You can't even delineate between what the things that I'm saying. I agree with you that corporate tax avoidance is a massive problem. I disagree with you that the immigration to this country is not a problem whatsoever. There are problems created by that.
Did I say that?
Well, did I say it was the biggest problem?
Well, that's the question is why you've put immigration above, and as
Above
so far
what?
you've
Above
said
what?
nothing.
He's
You've
put immigration above because he represents a different political party from a different political tradition that has different values. You cannot put everything at the same point on the same totem pole, or otherwise there would be no politics. People disagree with each other on all sorts of issues. Because you're allowed to, and you have different political parties and different political traditions, and you express your view on those things at election time, for goodness sake.
And the silence says all, everybody. The silence says all. There isn't an answer, is there?
No.
There isn't an answer.
Of course there's an answer.
Thank you and good night.
And that's how Labour do it. They yell and they yell and they yell. Do you want the answer before I shake your hand? I'm all for preventing corporate tax evasion. I'm all for it. And I said that already. But this little bit of grandstanding was really the thing, wasn't it? That's what you were here for. You're not here to talk. You're not here to listen. You're here to tell me what you want me to be rather than what I am. I hope you got what you wanted. You got exactly what you wanted.
Yep, they got a little
See ya.
clip. See you later.
May I suggest?
What, do you want to stop now?
Yes, I think it's a good time to
Okay.
find up and find the pub.
Okay.
Because the battery's running low.
Right, okay, well, we're running low on batteries apparently, and I think I'm probably going to get sunburned from sitting out here all day. So I'd like to...
I'm going to have a sunburned face.
I'd like to thank everyone for coming out and listening to us speak, and thank you very much to Helen for being a resident legal expert. That was excellent. Thank you very much, everyone.
Before you run off, if any of you want copies of the... my UK edition doesn't have colour illustrations, but if any of you want copies of the Australian edition of Kingdom of the Wicked, which has the colour illustrations in it, which are very beautiful, Carla's seen them.
Yeah, they are, yes.
I have a few order forms here, but only... basically, my UK publisher doesn't like it if I sell or... copies of the Australian edition in here. They perceive it as taking away sales from the British publisher. Yeah. But there are about 50 copies available from this organisation, but please only take an order form if you want one.
Yes, and I would definitely recommend it.
Okay. Otherwise, if you're happy to get the UK edition, just buy it from Blackwell's or Amazon or Waterstones or whatever.
Right, thank you very much.